Okay, it is 7:02, and I'm going to call, this is Dean Banfield, I'm going to call a meeting of the Finance Committee to order and just give a little preamble before we start the hearing. We'll open the hearing in a minute. We'll take a motion to open that, but just a few notes about how that hearing will be conducted and how the webinar model works on Zoom for those who are new or haven't done this before. If you're viewing this through a Zoom interface, you will only see our Finance Committee panelists, those who are presenting, and a few additional members, the town manager, and some administrative help to help manage the Zoom call itself. If you are in the audience, you are considered to be an attendee. An attendee is not visible. However, when it comes time for you to participate in the hearing, what we would prefer you to do is use your Zoom application, and at the bottom of your screen, there's a little box that says Q&A. And if you click on Q&A, you can post a question, and you don't really have to post your question in advance. You can just say, I'd like to make a question. I'd like to ask a question, or I'd like to make a comment. And we will then recognize you. You will be brought into the video. You will be brought, your mic will be turned on, just like you were stepping up to the microphone at a regular hearing. And you'll then be able to introduce yourself in the normal manner. Please introduce yourself by name and your address in Concord, and then have at it. So it's pretty standard stuff, but if you're an attendee, you cannot see, unfortunately, you cannot see who the other attendees in the room are. That's just an unfortunate side effect of the way Zoom manages this kind of call. And so now I think we're ready to open the hearing. Can I get a motion on that, please?
Move open the hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And I get a second?
Second.
Seconded. Okay, I'm going to take the roll, and we're going to open the hearing. So I'm the chair of Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Ms. Ortner?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Guariello?
Yes.
Mr. Hickling?
Yes.
Mr. Swain?
Yes.
Mr. Jameson?
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous. We're open. The hearing is opened. So our first order of business tonight is to get a presentation and discussion of Article 25, Concord Public Schools Fiscal 21 budget. And for that, I believe we're going to turn the, how would you like to proceed on this, Court?
Donnie?
Would you like to, you're muted, Court.
Yeah, unmute. There we go. So
Okay.
Thank you for hosting the meeting and bringing us before you tonight. Wally Johnston, Chair of the Regional School Committee, myself, Vice Chair of the Concord Public Schools School Committee. We'll leave it in the capable hands of Jared Stanton and Lori Hunter, which is exactly what you anticipated. And we have heard a similar presentation earlier this evening, so I think you'll be pleased with the clarity that is going to come about tonight with the numbers.
Thank you, Court. Dr. Hunter, take it away.
Great, thank you. So Jared, I'm hoping can screen share. We're going to give you an opening view of what we've done over the last 2 months, really, to rebuild our budgets. And I think it's important to just talk through a high level of all the many variables that are happening for us as to how we got here. So we are proposing for Concord Public Schools and have a voted budget from the school committee last week of $40,700,077,193. I'm sorry, I've been in this Zoom chair since 8 o'clock this morning, so I'm gonna try to keep going here. So,
Okay.
Jared, if you'll mind.
Yep. So $40,777,193 is the new proposed budget. And Lori, this one is you, and then I'll.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was going to get to. So just high level of a lot of the work that's gone on and still continues to go on. So we approached this with an intent to maintain staff. We have new needs that we've never had before because of the pandemic. We know we needed to really put together a rich set of software platforms, given that so much of our work is remote. Even in opening schools this fall, there will always be groups of kids working remotely because we can't bring everybody back all at once or full time, never mind if we have to close again. We reviewed all of our materials and especially looked at those shared by students. We're going more and more toward single-use items and really sidelining things that are used by multiple kids. We're also creating tools for them to have at home in case we're closed for an extended period. We've been working on scheduling, a lot of work on scheduling and space usage, and that continues and is going to be reviewed right up till we get these final plans pulled together. We are limiting access to the buildings, and that has an impact, for example, on daily substitutes. We're going to be minimizing, actually starting without substitutes coming in on per diem basis and utilizing in-house staff. We're going to be limiting student travel for field trips. That's not allowed right now, so we need to be cognizant of that. It did have some cost attached to it that we've been able to lower our request, still leaving money for virtual field trips. And obviously with no transportation involved, that's another cost factor. We did have increased need for summer services, and we did that fairly proactively, both regular education and special education. So that's been factored in with what those needs were. And we are targeting certain kinds of professional development, certainly in technology, reworking of curriculum, social emotional learning, and our equity and anti-racist work. So we've done a lot of creative work there, really maximizing on our in-house expertise, as well as some consultants that we have longtime relationships with, both of which allowed for cost-effective measures and ongoing professional development with teachers essentially volunteering all summer, which we're grateful for their response to that. There are certain programs that are under major review. We're awaiting word on sports any minute now from the state, both DESE and MIAA. We're reworking performing arts and what those options are. We're not allowed to sing or play airborne-based instruments in the schools anytime soon, so that's considerable change to those programs. We have identified and stocked up on a wide range of PPE. We can talk on that if you'd like. We do believe in our securing outdoor spaces. This will give us different options in the fall and spring months for kids and teachers to be outside. We are creating screening tools so that we're collecting on a daily basis parent, student, or teacher, faculty, staff reports of a lack of symptoms, which means they can come to school and work. We're working closely with the Concord Health Department and our lead nurses to look at our health service delivery and the role and protocols we need, both for working with ill kids and if we had a COVID case, as well as the daily cleaning protocols, the deep cleaning protocols, and obviously if there's a response needed to a breakout of any single or multiple cases of illness. We are looking at both aggregate and individual needs for social emotional support. We've done a lot of work with the programs we have all around our advisory and open circle pieces, and are also really making sure we've got tools to identify those needing individual access. We have screeners in place electronically, self-reported forms kids fill out, as well as obviously a great deal of teacher input. And then finally, needing more intervention services. Our goal, just like it has always been, is to work with kids before they're falling way behind or before they're in crisis. And so we're building those kinds of structures and making sure some of the models we have that have been so effective during normal times are remaining intact despite all the very different moving pieces.
Excuse me, Dr. Hunter, may I just ask a quick question? Would you prefer us to hold questions till the end?
If it's programmatic on any of those pieces, I think like you could ask those now. If you have fiscal actual dollars, that might be best at the end after Jared's done some of that.
So let me just give it a try. There are four categories here that identified as new need, and I'm just wondering, are those not areas that would be compensated by the CARES Act?
So the CARES Act, and Jared can talk more on how the CARES Act pertains. They certainly could be. And so the piece that we're looking at and have had considerable conversation with the school committee about, we could use the CARES Act money for some offsets. We could also use the CARES money to help remain contingent, provide contingency money for the other unknowns that haven't come up yet. And that's the discussion we've had at the school committee, is to do some of both of those, offsetting some of the budget, but also leaving some for contingency of the things we haven't yet identified as we actually open the schools.
Dr. Hunter, one other quick request. Would you just very briefly talk about the discussion you had today earlier about the HVAC system?
Oh, sure.
I thought that was very informative.
Great, thanks, Dee. We had an HVAC consultant come through each of the schools in the last 2 weeks. He's put together a status report for us, which overall was very, very good. He did identify areas of need at, no surprise to all of you, Sanborn, Peabody, and Ripley. And the recommendation is for air purifiers to be installed in those spaces to ensure that the ventilation is adequate. We already have purchased those, and Jared can talk on the funding source. Those would certainly be CARES qualified, no question about that. And that's going to allow us to open schools in a safe way.
So just so you know, we ordered about 7 air scrubbers. They'll be in the first week in September. We ordered 57 HEPA air filters. Those will be in at the end of this week. In addition, the air purifiers, they'll be in at the end of this week. And then we bought 9 months worth of HEPA filters for all those units. So we're stocking up.
Thank you.
All right. So this is just so you know, this is a scaled down version of the presentation that you saw before, but we probably recognize all of the stuff that on this slide. We took the same process that we did back in the fall, and we reviewed every single line. We met with all the principals, and we looked at all the salaries. We looked at every possible thing we could possibly look at to come up and improve these budgets. It was a true team effort, and it was done quickly. So instead of breaking down the budget drivers by DESI function, I broke them down into 35 expense types. Some of these expense types include contract services, equipment, legal, longevity, stipends, maintenance, memberships, overtime, PD, and approximately 15 salary categories. The current increase over FY20's budget is $1,387,030, or 3.52%, and have identified $2,090,110 in budget drivers. The first is a small amount, 25 in contingency, which brings our total contingency to $150,000 in this revised budget. We hired a special education chair after the FY20 budget was formed, and here is that budget expense in here. We hired 3 assistant principals for our elementary schools after last year's budget cycle. They make up the bulk of this estimate. All 3 assistant principals were hired within, and their positions were not backfilled, which is the reason why the next line, teacher salary, is only increasing 1.33%. If you include the monies that were transferred to the principal's line, teacher salaries would be up $705,000. The budgeted tutor FTE increase in FY21 over FY20 is 10. We did not hire 10 additional tutors in FY21. Instead, we originally budgeted to reduce tutors in the FY21 old budget, but we now need to retain them since our needs have changed. We also did have some student services that were needed and required for one-to-one tutors before the pandemic. Those one-to-ones help keep those kids from going out of district, but they would now be fixed cost. Up until a few years ago, most of the middle school student activities were funded by the Parents Association. Now they are funded partially through a revolving account balance that is dwindling and is now part of the general fund. Due to the need for more remote and hybrid learning, the district needed to purchase more online software in just about every subject. Between April and June, many of these softwares were free to the district as a trial and will now be a fixed cost. Some of these costs could be charged to the COVID-19 grant, so that is good. The special education tuitions are misleading. I explained this in the winter budget cycle as part of the FY20 budget cycle, which was in December of 2018. We had a very healthy circuit breaker revolving account balance, and to build the FY20 budget, we increased our general fund circuit breaker offset by $150,000 more than we were expect to get to ease the tuition costs. This past winter, we did not have any circuit breaker rollover, and the additional $150K was not available to offset. The situation has now changed, and I expect to have over $600,000 in our circuit breaker revolving account. This was not applied to this budget. So overall, tuition costs are down, which will decrease our circuit breaker reimbursement for FY21, which was already accounted for in this budget. And this gives us a real cost of what the special education tuitions are at this time.
Before you move off that slide, Jared, could I ask one question?
Yes.
And that is, you have a small font thing saying that $705,000 and $100, which is a 3.10% increase if you add the assistant principal salaries. It does not appear that also adds that team chair. Is that team chair considered a teaching position, or what is the?
Yes, that is a non-union administrative position.
It's an administrative position, so it's not in the teaching category of the unionized teaching roles.
Correct.
And
yep.
if a person becomes administrative within the school, they become an assistant principal, are they then no longer part of the union, or how does that group work?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So then we have tutors. Sorry. It's been a long day on Zoom for me as well. Tutors, you see a large increase. We budgeted the budgeted tutor FTE increase in FY21 over FY20 is 10. We did not hire 10 additional tutors in I already did that. Sorry.
Can you advance the slide?
Excuse me?
The slide needs to be advanced, I think.
That is right. There we go. You're right.
There we go.
Okay, sorry. So utilities, quite unpredictable. These are more in line with FY19 actuals. I did include them as a budget driver because they are an increase of 94,000. And then we have two buses that we are replacing next year to stay on our cycle. So again, we identified $2,090,000, $110,000 in budget drivers. To offset these budget drivers, we identified $617,000 in cost savings. And here are some of the cost savings. Most of that came from special ed and maintenance. We did have some increases, such as in special ed transportation, as well as district-wide toner contract that is saving us money district-wide, but it is now in its own line. We reduced equipment throughout the district, as well as field trips. We left a little in there for virtual. Professional development, as Dr. Hunter said, we reduced the professional development lines, and we're doing more within. The salary aids has decreased, more of just the way that we're budgeting them. Same with the clerical staff, as well as the non-union. In substitutes, we reduced all of our in-house substitute lines, and we kept ones for long-term subs. So this is a level service budget. The increase is 3.52%, or $1,392,711. And again, the new budget is $40,777,193. And that is Article 25.
Chris, you had a question? Can we go back to full view? If we stop sharing, we can see everybody's hands. Any questions from the Finance Committee on Article 25? Chris?
Yeah, I had a question, Jared. In the sped spending, there's a reduction of about 208,000 related to externally contracted services. Is that different from tuition?
Correct. So every single budget location, such as the all three elementary schools, as well as the middle school, they all have contract services. We have a new special ed director. This is her first budget. She did a zero base of these. And we revised the way that we've done things, and we were able to reduce our contracted services by that amount.
So are those people that are these individuals that you hire, or is it, what would the service be?
And Laura, you can jump in, but these
Sure.
are,
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a range. It depends on the student's needs. Sometimes in the past, we've had behavioral consultants come in. Now we have our own suite department of BCBAs. So a lot of it was outsourced, might be a word you're more familiar with, where now we've built a lot more in-house capacity. The combination of the intensive programs, but also the people that run those programs come with a lot of skill set that we can then have benefit other kids as well. So we've just been able to do more in-house is really the easy way to say it.
Okay.
And that's great in so many ways.
Okay, great. Jared, I'm just going to go back because my head gets kind of twisted on the circuit breaker for CPS. So you coming into FY20, you had assumed you would be you wouldn't have any circuit breaker carry forward. You ended up though with a large balance because of reduced spending, I assume. So how does that feed into the change that I see in the budget? I'm just trying to connect the dots as I work through, and I know it's complicated, so.
Sure. So going back to December 2018, which is FY19,
right.
We had near the max of the carryover that we were allowed for circuit breaker. So what we did at that time is we took 150,000 more than we anticipated to get from the state, because we thought that we would have carryover. And we reduced tuitions by $150,000 more than we were expected to get. When we closed the year, we used some of that money to redo the way that the big special ed redo last summer, which is a result of tuitions being down, contract services being down. But we had to use some of that circuit breaker money to offset more tuitions during the year to free up some cash. When I did the FY21 budget this past December, I did not anticipate having a single dollar left over in the circuit breaker account. That has since changed.
Right.
And now I anticipate to have that $600,000. And what that is that's a contingency for special ed. I could probably have up to over $1 million in there, which is what we used to carry. That's something that I want to get back there, especially for CPS when we don't have the reserves that we are entitled to at the high school.
Right. So you only have 150 at CPS. So so by not taking the 600,000 into the FY21 budget, that's sort of like a contingency. Is that the way to think about it?
Well, yes and yes. So we're going to have that 600,000, but the reason why it showed up as a budget driver is because we didn't have that additional $150,000 of an offset. So it made it look like tuitions are increasing when they're not. We just used, I got kind of caught, but it was a good gamble at the time.
Okay. I think I understand it. Thank you.
Anyone else with questions on Article 25?
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? I must not understand what the definition of level service is. because I look at your charts and I hear about 3 new assistant principals and new positions and new buses, and then I see a conclusion of level service. So could someone define level service for me, please?
Sure. So the 3 assistant principals were reallocating curriculum specialist positions we already had. So we actually didn't add people to create those positions. We just redrafted what their roles were going to be. I suppose you could argue that, for a team chair to be added, we didn't add service to students. What we did add was a much stronger layer of leadership to the special education provisions so that we're in a much tighter place in terms of monitoring and providing for kids, which is why the out-of-district numbers are strengthening and the contracted service numbers are going down and some of the pieces of that. So in my previous worlds, and John, you make a good point, every district I've been in, level service means slightly different things. To me, that means we didn't add another big program. We didn't have a need for a big enrollment jump to figure out. We didn't have all these major shifts in Concord's history. We didn't have Spanish, for example. We didn't have a late start time change. Some of those really big initiatives, there is none of that in this budget, unless you consider just pandemic responsiveness part of that. But what we tried to do was reallocate so that we were not just adding on, even to manage that.
So that makes sense. Thank you for that. I guess when you make decisions that cost more, that's where I have trouble conceptually with the definition of the conclusion of a level service.
Yeah, and I see level service in terms of what we're providing to students. So it's good you asked that, because clarifying that is definitely important, because that doesn't mean there wasn't some cost to remanaging or reorganizing or serving them better.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions on Article 25? Mary?
I've got a quick question. As far as the $225 per student that you've got, I know that's separate from your budget, right? It's
Correct.
not embedded in either okay. Can you just remind me again what that number is?
So at the CPS, it's just under 468,000
Okay, great, thank you.
and 297 at the high school.
Yep.
Any other questions? I see in the Q&A block we have a few people who'd like to ask a question. So I guess Chris, could you promote Brian Folds, who has a question?
Hi, Brian Folds, 33 Riverdale Road. I was wondering about when they were talking about the HVAC systems, they said the elementary schools did well. I'm wondering, could you give me more information about how the elementary schools did? Which ones needed more or less work? I know the high school, the middle, the Peabody and Sanborn locations needed a lot. That makes sense. But I wasn't able to get the information before.
Sure. So, and we're going to post all the report that he's put together. It'll be very detailed. Willard, extraordinary is pretty much the word he's used. It's state of the art, and he's only seen systems like that. I think he just said to the school committee at Ivy League schools and very elite places. It's well beyond what he normally sees in an elementary school. Alcott and Thoreau are doing just fine. We didn't need to do any remediation. Everything is functional and working. The flows and ventilations are adequate. We're in good shape there. So that really, we can give you more detail as we share the slides, but things are good there. They're not Willard. None of the buildings were Willard. So.
Well, it's great to hear Willard was doing so well, because it did get the LEED Gold certification when it was built, and that was the green certification that focused on indoor air quality. So I'm glad, given the pandemic, that it's performed as expected.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have one more audience member who would like to speak.
Sorry, Dean, is that Pamela Tritt?
Yeah, Pamela Tripp. Sorry. Yep.
Yep.
I was just wondering if the two additional school buses are electric, as we should not be making any more infrastructure investments in fossil fuel.
As part of our 10-year cycle, these ones are not electric.
Did that come through? Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Did I ask my question?
Yes,
You did.
Okay.
So these
Can
are
you answer
not.
it again, Jared? Yeah.
Yes. So these ones are not. The price differential is something that the general fund could not afford. So these are diesel buses. We are getting.
Why can we not hold off on buying them until we can afford?
Right now, we have buses that are in jeopardy of failing inspection. And we need to get them replaced so we can get the kids to school. The electric bus, not only the price, but the lead time on getting them is anywhere from 9 to 12 months potentially.
Why should we not be doing that right now?
So I'll answer that if that's okay. We're working really.
Jared answered the question primarily. It's primarily cost. I mean, that's absolutely, it's absolutely prohibitive.
I thought there were programs to support schools to do that we could surely qualify for.
We will be hearing for that at the end of this hearing this evening. Article 30 addresses that, and we will hear more about that.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to Article 26, the Concord Public Schools capital plan.
All right. So as part of the town manager's budget, we are asking for a sum of $830,000 to be expended on capital items. And it's as part of the 5-year capital plan with the debt service cost to be funded within the levy limit. The first one is ERU replacements at Thoreau and Willard. This would be year 1. We're estimating the cost to be $690,000. The next is an AC chiller replacement at $40,000. And lastly, a contingency for the middle schools for life and safety of $100,000. So the total amount is $830,000.
Jared, this is Prashan. What does ERU stand for those of us that are not?
Energy Recovery Unit.
So what is that?
So that
The heat exchanger.
right. That's what I was about to say.
Thank you.
As fresh air goes out of the building and it's been heated during the winter, this is a unit that tries to recover the heat before the air is cycled back out to the outdoor air and bringing in new air. So that's what it is.
And we do expect, a significant amount in savings in utilities, upwards of maybe 20%.
Okay.
And again, yep. So that is the final slide. We're asking for a sum of $830,000.
Can we go back to the full panel view and see if we have any questions from the panel? Thank you. Anybody? Mary?
Quickly, can you give me some examples of what the 100,000 contingency at the middle school might cover?
Sure. Water leaks, septic leaks, which we've had, I think, both of my years here. Anything extraordinary that could take the place of the general, that could help offset some general fund costs. Those have been the big ones. So anything extraordinary that might happen boiler, if a boiler needs to be repaired, even though that's the nicest room in the two buildings.
Okay.
Do you have concerns about the roof, Jared? Is that a major concern on either of the buildings?
No.
Okay. That's hopeful.
Yeah, I just jinxed ourselves, but I don't.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
We have occasional small leaks that need repair, but nothing that would bode terribly awful. So,
Okay. Any other questions about the capital plan? Okay, let's see if we have anything from the audience. I don't believe we. I don't think this is a new question from Brian Folds, but it might be. Let's see.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not. Okay. All right. So we are ready to move on to Article 27, the budget for CCRSD.
Great. So the new budget that we're asking for CCRSD is $35,144,038. The sum of assessments for Concord would be $23,747,968. That includes a debt assessment of $3,311,646.
Good. Very good.
The same approaches, we can go through that again, but the same approaches to this budget as the CPS that Laurie just gave us. The same zero-based budget process. The other thing that we do look into is on the high school side is the revenue side. We identified a number of budget drivers in this budget. Guidance was an increase. There was an increase.
Forward the slide, Jared.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. I have too many screens. I'm sorry. So same zero-based budget process that you saw before. Our budget drivers, so we identified $1,166,965 in budget drivers. These are a number of them here. We did increase a guidance position last year by one, but through attrition and some salary savings, the increase is only $42,356. There was actually a budget correction in the IT side, so that's actually not an increase as well. We had to increase the general funds portion of the monitors. The reason for that is because we anticipated getting 50,000. Every year we spend 50,000 to offset these salaries. We anticipate due to the hybrid schedule next year that we would only receive about 25,000 in fees, so we had to offset that. We hired a special education coordinator, and then contract services have increased. Our insurance and our pension is a budget driver, a modest one of just under 73,000. Overall, the teachers' amount is going up 602,739. That is due to steps and lanes for the most part. And tutors have increased. That is more in line. This number held actually in the December budget cycle. We negotiated with them last year, in the way that we recorded the tutors, and FY21 is more in line with how they were getting paid. And then utilities expecting an increase more in line with FY19 actuals. So again, overall, we identified $1,166,965 in budget drivers. To offset those budget drivers, we identified $694,000 in offsets. The biggest one being special education offsets. Debt also went down, and then field trips, the same as at CPS. We reduced those and kept a little bit of money in there for virtual. I just wanted to show our OPEB. So currently we are funding OPEB at $550,000. This is an updated balance as of June 30th. We have $5,668,402.
Can you speak to how that's working out in terms of the required contribution? Are we on a track to 2030 to
2030, the same year that the high school debt is being retired. So this is the they changed they don't call it the ARC anymore, but this is the suggested amount as of our last evaluation. As of right now, we are, as you can see, we have lowered the amount that the E&D is supporting the general fund revenue. At this time, we reduced that in FY21 to $300,000. There's some really good news, as I reported earlier, that we are now off Moody's watch list. We expect to have roughly 1.6 to 1.7 million in our E&D, which is going to be just under 5%. In addition to our circuit breaker at the high school will be maxed out. And all of our other reserves are healthy at this time at the high school. So they looked into all that. It was a fairly quick conversation. I felt that we were going to be off their watch list, and we now are. So that's really good news.
Hey,
So you really don't have a place to park that 300,000 because you've tapped, you're maxed out in your various accounts where it could go. So it's okay to
for
use
this
it.
year. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's reserved to reduce. That's how they call that. So you can go over the 5% if an amount is set aside for to reduce next year's budget.
So Jared, last time I saw something, I thought it was like you were 1.8 million on E&D, but then you had earmarked 300,000 to be used for the FY21. So you would be down around 1.5 in E&D after after the tagging. Is that the right range? No, it's up a little bit.
Yeah. So our E&D is actually, it's about 1.7 we're estimating. If you added the 300,000 in, we'd be at 2 million. But because that was voted to reduce the next year's budget, that is what they call reserve to reduce, and that is not applied to the current balance.
Okay, I always get that wrong. So 1.7 is net of the 300,000. I don't have to deduct it again. Okay.
Correct.
So E&D after the tagging for 300,000 is about 1.7 million.
Yeah, which will be just under 5%.
Okay. And the 5% rule, does that run to your budget? What is it, 5%?
General fund. So it's 5% of the general fund amount. Yep.
Okay, of the general fund budget. And then the athletic and the food service revolvers, you put in 3 months, I think you said, for each of those.
Correct.
So go ahead.
Yeah, my rule of thumb for food service is three to 4 months worth of expenditures.
Yep.
And then the athletic revolving, I'm just trying to, we've had a history of having around 70,000, 50 to 70,000 in there.
Okay.
And when I do the budget, I take a look at that, figure out what we're going to be using to spend against that, and wanted to get that monies back in to close the year, and we were able to do that.
Okay, so athletic is somewhere between 50 and 70 as a balance. And what does food end up with, the 3 to 4 months?
Food services, we usually have about 120,000 in there. I always get that in CPS confused, but right now we will have approximately, and I know the page, food service is about 120,000. So we ended last year with $121,066, and I tried to get it around that. It might be a little bit lower than that for this year, but I'd like to have, like I said, between 3 and 4 months worth, and it's about 35,000 a month is our expenses, give or take.
Okay, 35,000 a month. And E&D at the end of 6/30/19, so the prior year, what would that have looked like?
So we were about 2.7%. So
Okay.
we have gone up significantly.
Quite a bit. So we've almost doubled, well, more than doubled it, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So 2.7% of your general fund budget is what you would have had a year earlier. Okay.
Now, one of the main reasons for that is in FY18, we had 700,000 reserved to offset the budget.
Right.
So that was going against it. That next year we had 689,000.
Right.
So last year was the first year that we were able to start getting that E&D balance up because we reduced it to 350, and then this year 300.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Great. So here is the comparison of assessments. So for Concord right now, the total assessment is $23,747,968. That includes the debt amount. That is a $402,980 increase, or 1.73%. Overall, our assessments have only increased $183,026, or 0.59%. It's important to note that I am doing an enrollment study. Concord is going to continue to go up. It's probably going to be around 1 to 1.1% next year, which will have a budget impact. It gets a little stable in FY22 and FY23. I think it's around a 0.25 increase, but Concord is continuing to increase, and that will have an assessment impact. So again, our budget that we are requesting is $35,144,038. And again, Concord's total assessment is $23,747,968.
Chris, you have a question?
I do. I have one more, I think.
Sure.
Jared, just going back to the tutoring growth at the high school versus CPS.
Yes.
So at CPS, there was a description about needing some for not related to the pandemic, and I assume some related to the pandemic, or perhaps a reaction to the pandemic. We were going to keep tutors in place. At the high school, the number was up, but it sounded like that was a different rationale. Am I right
so
on
the number
that?
is, yes, the number is up about 120 something thousand. So we negotiated with the tutors last year, and this budget was the first time that we had used FTEs, and we had identified what a 1.0 FTE is. So it was sort of a budget correction. We did budget a little bit differently for the FY20 budget. This is more of an exact. They also had some extra hours that they were, a lot of extra hours that wasn't necessarily encumbered. So when I did do the FY20 budget and we did zero base it, it was hard to know exactly the hours that they were working. Now we identified what a 1.0 is. In addition, they do have some members that we call it an after-school homework club, or we don't call it a club, but an after-school homework.
Yeah.
And they're paid additional money for that. That is now reflected in that budget number. So it's more of, we haven't had an increase in tutors. It's just now I have a real understanding of our obligation.
Okay. So at the high school, we don't need additional, there isn't really a change in the service around tutors. It's more of an accounting accrual item. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary?
First of all, I want to thank you and the school committee and Laurie for coming in at the revised guideline that we published, finding that 310,000. That helps a lot. It brings the property tax down to something more manageable. So thank you for that. I heard you saying that enrollment, I'm thinking ahead now to FY22, and you said the enrollment is going to go up, and I think you said 1%. So does that mean that Concord goes from 76% to 77? Is that what you meant by the, okay, that's all. Okay, I'm thinking ahead too far, but thank you.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. We'll have the specifics October 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll have some very preliminary numbers of what that would look like. I might even compare it to FY21's current assessments and showing you what that enrollment would look like if the numbers stay the same.
Great,
Just
thank
so you
you.
can get a ballpark.
Yeah, we'll take that into account when we're doing the guideline, the enrollment should, okay, thank you.
Anyone else with a question on the high school budget? John?
Jared, could you just give me a minute on the accounting treatment for the CARES money? There are certain things in the budgets that will be, compensated with the CARES money. Is it just a timing difference? Where does that show up and where does it go?
Sure.
If you've got an item that you're requesting in your budget and then you're subsequently compensated with CARES money, how does that work?
Right. So at the high school, I'm anticipating 297,000. I know that I'm identifying more than $297,000 worth of expenses. I know that. We have to use that CARES money by December 30th. So what we're doing is just some of the things we're using them for. Masks. We're getting 2 tents at the high school. We might get separate funding for that, but right now that's going to be COVID money. Sanitizer, plexiglass. A lot of our new softwares that are required to enhance our remote learnings. What we're doing is when somebody requests that, it gets vetted. Once it's approved, we assign it to a special account. And then we know we're going to be audited on that. Ian Rames is keeping an unbelievable track of all of those costs. So it's sort of like set up like a grant, setting up an account and just pushing it to that account number. So when it's time, when the money comes in and we can offset it, it will be a simple thing to do. Now, if there are things in the general fund that were budgeted that we will now be used to offset that, to get to the guideline number, we did 2 things. The first thing we did is we increased our Chapter 70 number from the 2.5 that we had to what the current number is, which is 2.747 million. So that was 247,000. In addition, we did a offset in this budget, not the CPS budget, but this budget of $185,116, and that is a COVID CARES Act offset that we're going to be using monies that would have been general fund and appropriate and are going to be offset to that CARES Act. So that limits the amount that we're going to get. So that limits the 297 minus the 116. But I'm comfortable with all the contingencies that we currently have. If we need additional monies, we can use that. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Sorry, just to follow on, since Jared mentioned Chapter 70, do we have any sense yet? I mean, this is great news. It's level funded, for the time being. But what about the next year? Do we have any sense yet as to the sustainability of that level funding?
I'm hearing that they are making a true commitment to education. They put too many years into the Laurie, what was the monies called for the education reform?
Student Opportunity Act?
I'm sorry, the student. So they put so much time and effort into that Student Opportunity Act that they were to reduce Chapter 70, that would take us back years. So I know there's a commitment to that. I'm going to have a lot of conversations with colleagues in my associations on what to plan on for FY22. Because the governor will just have passed FY21, probably in October. when I'm going to be presenting to you again. So I wouldn't be aggressive, but I think the number that I plan on using for FY22 will be similar to the 2.747 that we're getting currently right now, which is a much better starting place than the 2.5 that I had on July 27th. The other thing that I'm unclear of, other than circuit breaker, that's another thing that we're unclear of, is Chapter 71 transportation reimbursement. I had an offset of $675,000 on July 27th, or I should say last winter. I reduced that by $125,000 on July 27th, but I don't know what's going to happen there. So I think that's a good shave off right now. I feel comfortable with that. If they do reduce it more, I don't think it will be much more than that, but I don't know.
I won't hold you to it.
Okay.
And just a couple questions, Jarrett. You said you maxed out on the circuit breaker. Could you give me a number?
I can. So we're going to be just over about 1.1 million.
1.1 million. And then maybe I missed it. Did you talk about the prepays that you made this year?
So I did not in this presentation. So we made we prepaid two things. The first one is we prepaid about $261,000 in special ed tuitions. That number is in our budget, meaning we did not assume that prepayment, and we're pushing that forward as a contingency to hopefully offset FY22 or FY23's budget. In addition, we prepaid $351,000 in laptops. And that's also something that could help future budgets.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the Finance Committee? Chris.
I think these might be for Dr. Hunter. So as I followed the conversation past couple of weeks, I guess, on this, there was a discussion about laptops versus iPads at CPS, and then was also discussion potentially of some early retirements. And I'm just curious if there was any more information on either of the, if you've decided how the budget reflects those two.
We did end up going with laptops at the elementary schools, and that's all within the budgeted number. We've gone to a 4-year lease. We were behind on the replacement cycle, so rather than just dump money into a Chromebook program that we know those machines aren't going to last, we're getting 5 to 8 years out of the Apple machines. It made more sense to us to invest in the lease and get the fleet of laptops at the elementaries back up to par while we fix the crisis issue we have right this minute. So that's where we landed there. It's within budget. It will mean we have to keep those lines stable, which was the goal all along. We really wouldn't have had a choice but to stabilize those lines because the age of the machines at the elementary was going to require that we fund it, irrelevant of really how we are in terms of big picture budget process. So we feel really good about that, actually. We feel like that's a known cost going forward. We know we're going to be in good shape for years to come as a result of that decision, as well as able to provide for kids during the pandemic. The early retirement program was successful at CPS. We had 5 teachers participate. So that's been positive and a positive for everyone involved.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions from the Finance Committee? I see none. I see no one stepping to the virtual microphone via Q&A or raising their virtual hand on the attendee list. So I think we're ready to move forward to Article 30, Healthy Buses for Students. And Brian Folds, I believe, is already joined to the meeting. So there he is. Okay.
How does that work?
That looks peachy.
Great. All right. On my end, I don't see my slides in the Zoom, but I do see them on my screen. Are you seeing the slides?
Yes, we are.
Great.
Just introduce yourself, Brian. That would be helpful, just so we all
Yes.
get the formal thing.
Yeah, Brian Folds, citizen petitioner for Article 30, which is healthy school buses, 33 Riverdale Road here in Concord. And is there anything else I need to
I think you did
divulge?
that. That's perfect.
Oh, good. All right. So I have a lot of slides and they have a lot of stuff on them, but this is my one time to explain my article. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly, and I'm willing to go back to any slide to answer questions, but I think it would be good to see all the slides and then get a quick 2-3 sentences on each, and then go back and answer questions.
Okay.
Let me make sure I got my machine going. Here is the article. It's requesting $200,000. Where that money comes from, I left up to the finance director to decide. I used her language so that she would have the flexibility. I've worked on many committees. I wanted to put a little something about me and what I've been doing in town, and give you a little table of contents of all these slides. So the history of this program goes back to when they first proposed a new high school. When that proposal was made, someone in the audience of town meeting asked where the bus depot was in the new plans, and the school committee said that they were considering outsourcing busing. There was a movement to save our bus drivers. And then there was land acquisition of W.R. Grace, which led to a delay in buying buses for a while that had schools coming back for 10 diesel buses at once. During that town meeting, there was a request for the schools to create a committee to look into alternatives to diesel. I'll have a slide about that. That committee found a grant program that we took advantage of, and we kind of made a plan to do an 80% electric fleet whenever financially feasible. And the next slide is that committee that was formed. This is a quick synopsis of what they were challenged with. It looked at diesel, it looked at biodiesel, it looked at propane, it looked at CNG, it looked at electric, all the different options that could drive a bus and get students to and from school, what the infrastructure was, what the fueling was, what the maintenance was, and which one of those choices would be the best one overall. And there's a link to their presentation. The conclusion was electric was great in every category except one, which was first purchase price. It is quite high. It's about 3.5 times the first purchase price of a diesel, but the life cycle is lower if there's incentives. And I'll get to that at the end. And here's the pilot we were able to take advantage of and get one of these buses. The bus and the charger were no cost to the town. The installation of that charger was a cost to the town, but net it was cheaper than doing a diesel. So we participated in the pilot and we learned quite a lot. There's a wonderful video that's linked here on this slide that I highly suggest people go watch. I wanted to talk about the health effects of combustion engines. COVID, which my other article was presented in February, on a warm day in February. It was 70 degrees in mid-February. Here we are with the heat waves in the summer. This is due to human action. This is what we emit from our tailpipes. You can see in these pictures the difference in visibility in these pictures side by side when we did the lockdown and when we didn't. And also in these satellite photos from NASA, which shows NO2 emissions, which is coming from the diesel engines. You can see the massive decrease as we took the cars off the road. This improves health outcomes. And these are the health effects of diesel. I showed this in my other slide, so in order to save time, I'll keep going. I also showed this slide. This is the effects of climate change. Climate change isn't related to a specific event. It's a threat multiplier, as the military describes it. It enhances bad things, whether it's heat strokes, heart attacks, lung problems, these, whether it's flooding events, ticks, insects, crop failure, that's what climate change does. It's a long-term trend. So what is climate change? It is essentially a chemistry problem. It is if we stop taking things from the ground and putting them in aerosol into the air that reflect light and keep the infrared wavelengths of light heating up the planet, we solve all these problems. So we just simply have to stop digging it up. And here's the town strategy for the town to reduce. If we have a supply of clean electricity and we fuel switch how we heat our homes and we drive our cars, it is a massive reduction in the amount of these gases that we're putting in the air that heat the planet. That scenario is that 60% reduction, whereas we spent the last 8 years between 2008 and 2016 and only accomplished 6% reduction. So it's a very good solution, and we have many reports from the town that say that. Specifically to the school bus fleet, this was part of that analysis of those, the busing fleet. You can see that in certain years, we're burning 100,000 gallons of diesel to drive these buses around our town. And you think of 100,000 gallons of diesel, that's a lot. But then you add that to the oxygen needed for combustion, and it's almost 2 million pounds of greenhouse gases just from our bus fleet. And this is with 36 buses, and currently we're at 42. So our fleet is growing. And that's 8% of the municipal sector's greenhouse gas emissions. So addressing this one fleet can really help in this area. And I'll talk a little bit more about vehicle to grid, but this is a picture of our bus depot and our solar array from Concord-Carlisle. We have a great ability in town to capitalize on this kind of technology because we have our own electrical utility, a strong town manager focused form of government, and there's not a lot of barriers for us to do this adoption. We just have to show the will and show that it's financially feasible. So I wanted to put this in there because I had some geeks ask me about, well, how is a bus going to drive around all day and then discharge into the evening peak for electricity? So this is the example. Again, this is geeky and wonky, but I want to answer all questions. If you look at the chart, you'll see that the state of charge, that's how much energy is in the battery. Low at 2 a.m., it starts charging, gets full. 6 a.m., it starts driving. And then when it returns, it does a little charge and then discharges into that peak and saves us money. And on my next slide, I'm going to talk about the avoided cost. So when I say that this shedding of the evening peak will save us money, I'm talking about the RNS charges from the ISO. These are a per kilowatt fee that we pay based on our substation load through the light plant. If we reduce that load, we reduce this expense. Last year, this year, Article 17 says that we'll pay almost $4 million in this category. And we have each bus, each inverter, bidirectional inverter, will be able to put out 60 kilowatts. And the price for each of those is about $10. So each month, each bus with that inverter can save us $600 a month. And that's as long as, and the $10 that I'm multiplying by is forecasted to go up as we go, as you see there on that chart. And you can see the two charts I have up here on the right. One is load from 2008, the other is load from 2018. And the difference in that reduction is the solar adoption that has gone on in town. So that reduction during the day hours is primarily due to solar, but you can see that the effect of solar wears off towards where that little peak of the horse, so that head of the horse is there. That's where batteries come in and save us money. And that's because you can see the one below is how many times that hour of the day was our transmission peak. And this is an aggregate of 4 years. And you can see that it's around that 6 o'clock hour. So kids are off the bus is back in the depot at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and it can do these idle services while it sits there connected to the grid. So when there is no school, it's still doing work. It's still earning money by lowering our rates. And this is what happens during our solar saturation is the first graph. This is a Sunday when we have so much solar production in town that we have a low load issue rather than a peak load. And this allows us to absorb a lot of that excess energy without curtailment. And it basically, it allows us to put more renewables in town. The one to the right of it is where we're discharging into our ISO capacity hour. This is a 1 hour each year, which has a very high cost. And you can see that there's an orange line and then there's 2 gray lines on either side. And that is, the orange is the average over 11 years, and the gray lines are the max and min for those hours over the 11 years. So that drop that you see, here, let me see if I can put this on the screen. Yeah, this drop is the solar saturation. And this hump right here, this is our peak. This is the one that can cost quite a lot of money. And if I go to my next slide, I can show you why. So this year, it's expected to be about $3 million for that expense. In previous years, that has been $180 per kilowatt. So times that by 4,850, and you get like $8 million in expense. So this is our peak, our demand during those peak hours. And you can see how when we added those solar arrays, our percentage of New England's peak has gone down. That's savings. And here you can see the days. This happens in the summer when the buses are sitting around doing nothing in the lot. So those batteries are fully available to take advantage of this. And here is the price of that per kilowatt over these different years. And the tricky thing about this is we don't know what the price will be when we're setting our load. So prices may look low in 2020 and 2023, but the price for 2024 is based on our load last year. They have to go through an auction process to set that rate. So it's always best for us to shed load during that New England peak. So what is it that I'm asking for in this article? There's 2 basic things I'm asking for this money. One, the majority of it is for this vehicle-to-grid infrastructure. The idea of digging a trench every time we buy a bus just seems like a waste of money to me. And that's where we're being led to by the process. So I'm here to ask outside the process as a petitioner, let's do the basic, put the pipes in the ground, the connection to the grid, so that we can capture those savings. And here's a total cost of ownership so that you can get a sense of why we need to capitalize now on that Volkswagen incentive. And we need to focus on, buying it with the incentives available and how that saves money. Whereas buying a bus, which was the original intent, there were some advocates in town, they wanted to make a mandate that we only buy electric buses for health reasons. But that is an additional expense. And back in 2016, we agreed that we would do this when the life cycle cost is lower than a diesel. So that's that green area here. So here's what a diesel will cost in these categories. Here is the cost if we have no funding or no incentive. If we get an incentive for one bus, it drops and the life cycle cost goes below that of a diesel. And this is just with those peak shavings. There's other ways we may be able to get money through the clean peak standard and other factors, but I don't know if we qualify for those, so I'm not going to put them into the table yet. But when I talk about the savings from those grid services, that's this $140,000 per bus. That's the vehicle to grid savings. And you can see how the cost over the life cycle of 12 years on a diesel compared to an electric with vehicle to grid is strikingly valuable to the town over that time period. But still persistent is that first purchase price. And so my article is asking for about 50,000 of that is to ensure that we can get 2 of those buses, which is my next slide, which is just the first slide was 1 bus purchased. This is 2 buses purchased because we want to maximize that Volkswagen funding. The Volkswagen funding will do 80%, but it's capped at $500,000. So we can capture $500,000 and we can do regular, just charging of the bus as a normal electric vehicle, no vehicle to grid, no grid services, and we'll still save money. We'll still save some money. If we do 1 bus that does vehicle to grid services and the other bus is chained onto that with a second dispenser here, then we get the value of grid services is reduced because only 1 bus will be doing the grid services, but we can still operate 2. That sees more savings. That's still half-price buses over the life cycle. And if we do 2 doing grid services, which are these inverters, some of the costs initially go up for infrastructure, but over the life cycle, it goes even lower. And the reason that I'm so much an advocate for this technology is really the carbon impact, because we're spitting out with just 2 buses over their life cycle. We can reduce that by 66%, 2/3 reduction in emissions. And it's the important emissions. This is the emissions that our kids are breathing. This is directly where they're driving these, 70 some odd miles a day through our community. So you and I and the kids are all breathing everything that comes out of that tailpipe. So, and it's financially, it's valuable, but we need basic infrastructure. So I made a summary slide that says, we've done electric buses. That's very rare. We know what we're doing. They're healthier for kids. The emissions reduction is huge. And with the incentive of Volkswagen, which is limited, it's financial savings over the duration of the bus. And so this is just a summary, but I do have some additional slides I'd like to skip through, and we can go back. They may answer some of your questions. So I wanted to call out a 7-year-old here in Concord. This just happened to come across Twitter. Eric's son, Tyler, was doing it himself. He's going into 1st grade. He put a solar panel on the back of his little electric, I forget what those are called, little 12-volt things that kids play with. But that actually is charging the vehicle. And I thought that was pretty cool. So this is to show why the schools need that additional 50 grand to avoid taking the hit with education services. So I'm going to take a second. If you do one school bus, clicked on it. If you do 1 school bus, the net first purchase cost is $73,000. Now these numbers are what we experienced in the first round of Volkswagen funding. So the schools had a choice to pay less for 1 electric as a first purchase, which they gladly did and applied and received funding from the state to do our 2nd electric bus in town, but it's the only 1 in that round. Because if we do 2 of those buses, you can see how the per bus cost goes to $117, and that's $17,000 per bus above what they're budgeting, which is the $100,000. So I'm asking for up to $50,000 to cover that delta, so that the schools put in their budgeted $100,000 per bus, and this funding would cover that additional. In this calculation, it's like 34, but again, these numbers have changed. And then talking a little bit about the infrastructure, it's hard to compare diesel buses to electric buses when the electric buses require a charger. They require infrastructure to fuel them. But whenever we talk about the cost of diesel buses, the town had put in the fueling infrastructure for those buses. And that's the other part of what I'm asking for, is the basic infrastructure of conduit in the ground, service to the light plant. This was done in Beverly just recently, and the company that did it for the Beverly Bus Depot spent about $250,000 on this basic infrastructure. I'm asking for 150 because we don't need the same, we have our own utility, we have other ways, but we can do it for less. And that's a pretty good number for that infrastructure. And here's the details about what that infrastructure build is. We need to get specific plans, but it's basically, you can see this point is where the electrical service comes in from Concord Light into the depot building. It goes back out in an underground conduit and charges the existing electric bus. We need a new service connection here with multiple conduits running down to these machines along this row here where these buses park. And as we buy buses, we'll buy this unit and plug it in, but we need a concrete pad with the tubes and the bollards ready to go. And that's what this funding would pay for. And this is something I presented to the schools. We don't pay full price. We're always looking for an incentive to reduce that first purchase price. Add electric buses as soon as we can, whenever we can get that life cycle down below that of a diesel. And this has been an ongoing effort. And we're looking at multiple funding sources. We need buses that we can decommission in order to qualify for some of these. There's lots of terms and conditions in these grants or these funding opportunities. And if you want details on the buses themselves, that's the Thomas, the Bluebird, and the Lion. So a lot of slides, and I can go back to whatever you want, but this is my one time to explain all of this, so I apologize. It took a long time, but hopefully somebody learned something, and it was pretty good.
Thank you, Brian. Can we now go to the full display of all the members, and then we can see when folks are raising their hand and might want to have questions for you. Now, from the Finance Committee, any questions from the Finance Committee? We're going to go there first before we go to the audience. Greg.
Brian, real quickly, on one of the last slides, it looked like it said one of those chargers can charge 4 buses at max. You don't have to put the slide back up, but was that correct? And so we will only need 1 to start off with. So the 150 is mostly the conduit and putting the concrete pad in and getting the service there.
Yes. So let me see if I do want to go back to the slide. I don't know how to quickly do that. But yes, so there's a PCS, which is the inverter that changes the current from AC to DC. Oh, I just missed it. So this big box and this box here, they are.
Don't hit the slide.
What, oh, sorry, not sure.
My basic question is, so we could probably get four buses before we had to put more of these in. They're probably not that expensive, but it just caught my eye there.
Yeah. So no, it's a good question, and I did break down the costs for doing so. So yes, this system can do up to 2 dispensers. This one can do 4, and so we need at least one of these to start, and then we can connect more buses. The important thing is that if we look at this bus 2 model, you'll see here in the last 2 columns that vehicle to grid service. So if we do one big box or one of these PCSs, and then we put 1 dispenser we can get this kind of value out of it. If we do 1 PCS and 2 dispensers, we can get half the grid service value out of it. And so but that's not what the 150,000 is what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for the 150,000 is a place to put these machines. It's the connection to the greater grid between the machine and Concord Light.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to stop sharing so you can see hands.
There we go. D.
Brian, I have several questions for you. I'm not sure what the sequence is going to be. It'll depend on how your answers go. One of the first questions I have for you is Article 31 will not be moved. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I spoke with the town manager, and we are going to do that report, so there's no need to debate that at town meeting.
Who is going to do the report?
The Director of Sustainability with input from the department heads.
And the department heads are just for the town or the town and the schools?
The town and the schools. Any town-owned vehicle, whoever operates the budget for that, would participate in informing Kate about their process.
Okay, and when do you anticipate that will be finished?
When I can come up for air and help her out in getting that done.
I'm sorry, what?
Sorry, it's Stephen. Do you want me to answer that, Brian?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we're not sure of the timeline. Actually, just today, you're all the first to find out. I did sign an application for grant funds to bring in a consultant to help us with the fleet analysis as well. So I don't know what the timeline on that is. Kate Hanley is expert in sustainability matters, but not necessarily an expert in fleets. And so hopefully we'll get the grant and we'll move forward as expeditiously as possible.
Okay, so that actually raises another question or two. In going through what I was able to find online about the VW program, I did come across the fact that we have already received $295,005.79 for 1 electric school bus and 1 charging station.
Correct. That's round 1. We only did 1 bus in round 1. I'm hoping to do, if this article passes, we will do 2 buses in round 2. If it does not,
stop right there, please.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so round 1, I have not seen any information on round 2. Can you maybe tell me where I could find that information?
Yes. If you go to I can send you an email, but it's on the state website. They have not released the date of round 2. Mass DEP sets that schedule, and we have not heard.
Okay, because I went to the Volkswagen not their website, but our state website on it, and I haven't seen anything published since December of 2019. And I called today, and the people are working at home. So I was just concerned because I hadn't seen anything. And already having received funding in the first round, is that going to be separate funding in the second round?
Yes.
Another $500,000 will be available in the second round.
Correct.
Okay. And is that in the open solicitation program?
Correct.
Okay. So in the open solicitation, I would assume that you could have infrastructure, you could have school buses, you could also have transit buses.
You can't do infrastructure. You can do the vehicles and the chargers, but not the infrastructure.
The chargers, okay. You can do the chargers and the vehicles, but it could be both a school bus and it could be a town bus, right? A different vehicle.
It could.
Okay. So I guess part of my question is if there's a task force or a group that's working on an infrastructure for the town, it might be prudent to wait to see what vehicles would serve the best purposes before we just jump into buying another school bus or two.
So so you're right. This is buying a school bus is what we have on the table right now. The consultant this is the first I heard that we're going to be getting a consultant. The expectation was the second round applications were supposed to be due already. So because of COVID, they're delayed, like town meeting. So if there becomes a time where we have, because the town is limited to 500,000.
Correct.
So if there is a real opportunity for round two for a garbage truck or some other vehicle, that's good reason. My point is we need to electrify all the town fleet. We can't financially, push these things forward unless they make, they pencil out. And if that means that we do one school bus and one garbage truck, that's how it works out. And then because it says up to, we don't use that money that gets set aside in the article.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that needs to go to the department that is buying that other bus or that other vehicle. I don't see that happening in round two. That may happen in round three after we have a report. So I fully expect, I'm surprised the applications aren't due for round two already. And I'm very concerned about waiting until the 13th to figure out if this article passes. But it's the way the schedules are working out. Does that answer your question fully?
It answers my question fully. Thank you very much. That question fully. I guess another question that I have is, you have answered the question. I still am concerned that about a school bus, purchasing a school bus, and you had in one of your slides, you just showed Bluebird, correct?
Yeah.
And Bluebird was not the bus that that we received in the past. Is that correct?
The pilot bus was a Lion, correct?
Right. And I know at at one of the meetings you had indicated that you might want to get a different bus or two. And in bringing on a different bus, you're also going to have mechanics become familiar with that bus as well. And so I'm just looking at that as another issue. So do you want to have two like that? Do you want to just have one like that? One Bluebird bus so that you're able to work on that. Another thing would be,
so D,
is there currently capacity for charging two buses?
So I'll answer that question in a second, but as for the details on the bus, we have proposals from an RFP. These are 3 of those manufacturers. I got a ream of paper to go through on the details of each of those buses. As for doing a different brand of bus, that we're in early days. So the vehicle to grid performance of some of these may be better. The experience with the first bus may be helpful. Some of these may have drawbacks as how they have to be sheltered in cold climates. That's a no-go for us because we don't shelter our vehicles. So that's the discussions going on with the schools about which of these proposals to accept in round one. And a lot of that has to do because there's other technical issues. So some of these vehicles do not have an AC inverter on the vehicle. They rely on that PCS. So if this doesn't pass, we can't buy certain brands of these buses because they don't have that onboard inverter, and we'll have to use the inverter, a slower charge over time through the building. That would skew us to buying a different bus. So
yeah,
there's a lot
definitely
there, and this article is keeping everything up in the air, and I really kind of want a decision so that we can take action and conclude. And
understandably, everybody wants decisions on the budget for the year we're already in. Another question I have is, the school has its own program and has its own plan for purchasing school buses, excuse me. And I'm just wondering why the schools are not presenting this article, or why the town is not presenting this article.
Well, I can't answer that question as the negative, but I can tell you the origin of this article. So there was a group in town that wanted to purchase healthy buses for our students as a mandate. We wouldn't be allowed, if this article that they proposed had gone through town meeting and passed, it would say Concord will not buy diesel school buses, and we will only buy electric school buses going forward. I know that is not, it's a great ideal in execution, but financially it's not feasible. And
Correct.
so I worked with them to help shepherd this article through to keep us going at a good clip of adoption of these electric vehicles whenever they're financially valuable. That's the origin of this article. As to why the schools aren't presenting it, I think it has to do with the fact that they have a lot going on, and I'm kind of the guy on buses. I see Lori has turned on her screen, so I'm going to let her answer.
Yeah, I think, we had been talking a lot with Brian and really actively engaged in this conversation back this winter. We do have a strong commitment to expanding the electric fleet. The conversation led to a discussion of how to maximize the grant money, because we were only able to get one out of the limited amount of funds last time. So Brian brought a lot of great ideas to us about how to maximize that to potentially get to two. At the same time, the infrastructure issue is valid. So all of that was in the works, and through working with Brian, and actually even through the town leadership, as Brian proposed this is where it evolved to. There was earlier iterations of this article. This felt like a way that was most beneficial both to the goals, but also to the district to continue its progress. And I'll be honest to say, Brian's not wrong that Jared and I wouldn't have had a chance to talk about that at all since March 12th when school closed. So I think we're supportive of Brian's efforts. We definitely want to expand the fleet. And the only way to maximize this next round of grant money would be support to this. So that's the nutshell version. It had some nice progress going, and then the crisis certainly slowed that down, and Brian's energy is why he's still here tonight with you.
I understand his energy. Lori, a follow-on question for you.
Dee, can you wrap it up and let someone else have a question?
I just have one more question. I have one more question, okay, which is to Lori, which I remember at one of the meetings, maybe back in February, and Brian had come in, and one of the comments that was made at that time is, if this article didn't pass, that you thought you would have funding for one vehicle yourself.
Well, the grant—
Is that still correct?
The grant has been—
The grant, yeah.
The grant has been $500,000, and the buses are 3-ish. So the math just doesn't equate to be able to do two without some supplemental money. And the infrastructure is going to be an issue, because we're going, right now we're doing it with the areas we have. But to add, any more to the fleet, like Brian described, is going to result in some needs there. So can we get one more from the current grant, the upcoming grant? I would expect we could.
I think you could get one, right?
Correct.
I would say that's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And this slide, Dee, is
Yep.
the breakdown of what limited us to one and not maximize the grant last year.
I think I saw Mary's hand up, but I don't have my grid there. Mary, was your hand up? Yep. You're muted.
Out of the $200,000 that you're asking for, how much of that money that you're asking for now is because you need to take advantage of a VW settlement amount that is time sensitive? So
Well, all of it. I mean, there.
I thought you said that they wouldn't cover infrastructure.
Correct. That's why I need this to pass.
No, wait. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't ask my question well.
Okay.
So the $200,000 is going to be spent on some things that are going to take advantage of the VW grant and some things that don't take advantage of the VW grant. Is that correct?
No.
It's all for,
So
none in there for infrastructure?
So we could capitalize on the grant, but then not be able to operate the vehicles because we don't have the basic infrastructure. So the grant only covers the vehicle purchase and the charger mechanics. It doesn't cover
Great. Okay,
the
and how much is
installation.
that? And how much is that?
The vehicles?
Yeah, and the charger.
So let me go back. Ooh, okay, sorry. Let me. Oh. Dun, dun, dun. Oop, I've lost Zoom. Sorry.
We can still see you.
Yeah, you can see me, but I'm trying to show a slide. Let's see if we can't.
No.
I got layers of windows and multiple screens. Apologies for the delay here. That one. Do you see the slide with the
Yes.
table?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to go. This is one vehicle. So if this doesn't pass, we would go back to doing this column here, which is one vehicle. Don't maximize the grant. Put in a single direction charger, and then we don't get any grid value out of it. That $150,000 is to put in the connection to CMLP, the concrete pads, the tubes, the conduit, so that if we do one bus, we can get that vehicle to grid service out of it. So without that infrastructure, and that $150,000 is a one-time thing. It's like building the diesel fueling station at the depot. It's very equivalent to that. It's a one-time, get it in place, and then once that's in place, we can maximize the grants going forward. But
thank you.
Yeah. And this,
Brian, while you have that slide, well, you can use this one. This one's fine.
Okay.
Let's talk to this one for 1 second.
This one maximizes the grant with 2 buses. The other one.
Understood. I have a question. Why don't you go to the 2-bus scenario?
Okay.
There you go. Okay. So in the line, grid services.
Yes.
We see that grid services with dual V to G, there's a $294,000 benefit, and that's realized over what time period? How quickly is that realized?
What's also important is the mechanism in which that's realized. So I have a 12-year life cycle is what I'm using.
Okay.
So that would be the value over 12 years for 2 vehicles and 2 PCSs. Now, the savings is found in avoided cost at the light plant for its expenses. So that savings will come back to CMLP ratepayers as lower rates in the future.
So you've calculated that 294 because we have trimmed our maximum usage peak day or whatever. Is that the goal there is to trim that down, and whatever minimal amount we can trim that back, that these buses will trim it back, you can monetize that over 12 years. We get there's a $294,000 savings.
That is,
I just want to understand where the savings is generated. It's generated because we're shaving our peak usage day. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So can we go back to the 2-bus scenario chart again?
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, we're getting there.
We're getting there.
There. One more. Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, fine.
Sorry.
So, as I understand it then, the light plant and the ratepayers, so to speak, are saving $294,000. Have you approached the light plant and said,
Yes.
can you use any of your reserves to fund this so that you will see a benefit stream? And why is that infrastructure not something that they would just happily pay for if all they need to do is pony up $150,000 today to get $294,000 of continuous savings into the future? That's a total win. So why the light plant is not engaged in this is beyond me.
So the light plant has been very helpful in working with me, but this is why I'm going to town meeting. There is no process for me to follow that gets to the correct solution. So that's why I'm a petitioner. So it's the difference between property tax payers and rate payers. And the light plant doesn't buy buses, and the school department doesn't do grid services. And this marries the two for the first time. And so that's why Article 31 is also there, is to help look at these infrastructure needs. So Article 31 is a report to look at these kind of needs around different buildings so that we can plan them into the town process for this fleet that we're going to have, that we're going to fuel through electricity. That's why that report is so necessary, because we could have forecasted this need for this infrastructure, and we could have had the light plant, the school department, the town manager all at the table when writing the report. So that's why these two articles work together, and I'm very happy to hear we're getting a consultant to solve that issue.
We watched the light plant revolving fund we watched their budgets. They have substantial reserves at the light plant in unencumbered cash on hand. It's just unthinkable to me that this is not, it pays for itself. The revenue stream is obvious. The light plant should be engaged in the infrastructure component of this. And if the town needs to subsidize getting the maximum value of the grant, so be it. That's fine. But I don't see why why the town should dip into a free cash reserve in order to do this. This is that's just me. I'm just speaking my mind.
So Dean,
I just think it's upside down. The way I'm not blaming you. You're trying to push, and you're pushing a rock up a hill, and I get it. But,
Sisyphus.
but it's black and white on this page right here. It's black and white to me.
But this page was developed over arguing with many committees over 5-6 years. You know, it's being first is difficult. And this is a new experience for the town and its process. Staff has done a wonderful job in helping me navigate this as best we can. And the committees have helped me navigate this as best I can. And I have worked very hard to pull all this together. And you're right, hindsight is great. And that's why that report from Article 31 should document that we need a process for that kind of collaboration. In that article, I say we have to look at the motor pool for the DPW, and they will need the same kind of infrastructure. Let's learn from this experience and have the light plant put that infrastructure in. If the staff and town manager and leadership feel that's the appropriate process.
Can I ask a question, Dean?
Yeah. Can I?
I don't know if Stephen, is Stephen Crane still on? Maybe he can answer the question. In other words, does the light plant?
I think it's.
I am.
Does the light plant actually have the authority to buy the infrastructure if it's not directly related to the production of electricity?
They may need an easement.
Well, no. To go back to Dean's point, they do have reserves. They have a rate structure that they're actually in the process of studying now. But how they spend their money is regulated as well, even though it's not necessarily regulated by town meeting.
Right.
And so they don't have like a barrel of cash that they can just go dip a ladle into and spend on stuff. It's all what they can spend their money on is highly regulated as a utility.
Okay, that I think I don't know who regulates it, but maybe that's a longer term solution, because that chart, I think it's a useful chart, but it does mix apples and oranges in terms of sources of funding, because there's two of them there. And then the value, as Dean pointed out, actually accrues not to the taxpayer, but to the ratepayers.
Right.
Correct.
There's an overlap there, certainly, but long-term fix maybe is to let the light plan and maybe even other entities, right, invest in these types of technologies and infrastructure that save them money in the long run.
I fully.
I guess I agree with that for sure. I think that's a good point. I just think, when you have two structures that are both kind of tightly built, Brian articulated very simply. CMLP doesn't buy school buses, and CPS doesn't do grid services. Like, it's just and there's no place for them to even meet in the middle, but for this article. Like, it's fun.
No, it's a great article. I support it if it's creative, etc.
Yeah, I think everybody supports the concept.
Yeah.
Minimally the concept. I think we all want to see more electric buses.
And I think I would add to that and say, I would like to, when we finish this experience, put that into that report so that we can have a better process as a town, whatever that should be going forward. So I don't have to come to town meeting to ask for funds. I said I don't want to come back to town meeting and ask for funds. That's the infrastructure part. I fully expect that next year, if there isn't some other mechanism found, I may come back next year asking for 50,000, but again, to make sure we don't take education funding away from kids and we maximize the grant from the schools. Yes, Dean, you want to call on Mary or?
Mary, sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sure my comment just sparked her question.
No, what I'm thinking of is I saw a presentation recently by Kate Hanley to the select board about a report that she published, Sustainable Concord. And in there, she's looking at many different things, but one of the main pillars of this was to electrify both the fleet in the town and to electrify some of the buildings. And I envisioned that out of that report would come a broader plan as far as how to electrify and the infrastructure needed to supply energy to a fleet. And so I'm wondering if this is like an ad hoc thing that should, how does this integrate with a broader plan?
Sure.
So I don't, that's my question.
Okay, so I'm here speaking on my own behalf, but I also am the chair of the Climate Action Advisory Committee. And we were the citizens group to work with Kate Hanley on that climate action and resiliency plan. So that's why you see these concepts in that plan. And that plan is a framework to take from the Concord needs to be more sustainable to here's some definitive priorities and bite-sized pieces of projects to work on. So Article 31 still fits in as one of those implementation steps in the plan. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Are you looking for
Brian?
Brian?
Hey, Brian. It's Brian. Hey. So can you go back to, there was a map, you don't need to actually pull it up. There was a picture of a map that you were trying to illustrate how the power supply would revert back to the grid, basically. And I guess my question is, as I've been trying to process what you've been saying, I've been trying to understand, or at least analogize this to something that makes sense to me. When CMLP was offering internet service, they were running the lines right up to the property line, and then you had to come up with the cost of, running a line to the street for all intents and purposes. And so when you mentioned this, I was thinking about this in the same sort of way. Is that a fair comparison?
Very, very much so. So commonly the light plant will work up to the property boundary, and then it's up to the property owner to come to them.
Okay.
And so the idea that the schools would pay for this infrastructure makes sense. But remember, the depot itself was built by the town, not the schools. So, who should pay for this? You can make an argument for all three entities having a reason why they should pay for it.
The question, which I think everybody's grappling with on some level, is where does this money come from? If we as a finance committee collectively agree, this is a great idea, and we push this forward, the question then fundamentally becomes, where does the money come from? And then who actually has the ability to, who has the authority to actually pony up the cash for all intents and purposes?
That's the core reason that I've left it up to the finance director to do the wording of where the money comes from.
Okay, and so I guess I don't know if this is a question for Stephen or if this is a question for you, but you have this consultant coming online now that's going to do what exactly? Help us understand what?
So we're writing a grant to hire our consultants, and hopefully we're successful. It's not huge money, but basically analyze our fleet and identify areas where I assume a schedule for electrification. I mean, you have to bear in mind, and I think Brian would probably disagree with me, there aren't really vehicles that are viable to replace one for one all of the functions that our municipal vehicles do.
Yes, I would disagree with you, but there are cases where there is no replacement. Yeah.
Right. I mean, especially with heavy equipment and stuff like that. I mean, when you're talking about, switching over to hybrid or electrified police cars or staff vehicles, that's easy. We want to do that. Every opportunity we've had to so far over the last few years, I think we've tried to take advantage of that. But I don't think they make an electric jetter truck, and that's a vehicle that's out every day. And so I think we just need to, when we say electrify the fleet, if you're talking about cars and pickup trucks, that's doable. When you talk about specialized equipment, it gets a little bit more challenging. And so I think that's where we want to consult to say, what's the landscape look like now? Where's technology coming? And kind of put us on a timeline for adoption.
So Steve, if we vote for this unanimously, what are we voting on exactly? Because no one knows where this money is going to be coming from. So
what's it say?
I'm a little confused.
I'd have to look back to where the article. I thought it was from free cash.
No.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't say that anymore.
It says raise and appropriate or transfer.
Well, the rule of the meeting, to just chime in here, the rule of the meeting typically is that it needs to be identified. The source of the funding needs to be identified in the motion.
Right.
So I don't think we can go with this as a motion. This would have to be modified to show exactly where that's coming from. Now,
is Carrie LaFleur on?
I believe she's still.
I am.
Oh, could you speak to, because I let you do the wording. So
Sure. So the wording that is shown in the presentation is what was sufficient for the warrant article. As we prepare the motion, we certainly have to be specific as to the funding source, and the funding sources available at this time would either be free cash or taxation.
So there's no more headroom in the town manager's allocation of debt that was part of the debt plan. We've reduced the debt plan, Carrie, this year. This is.
It wouldn't be debt, Dean.
Pardon me?
It wouldn't be debt. It wouldn't be debt.
The debt piece, I think the way this conversation is sort of going is 50 grand is necessary right up front to get this grant. And then there's the infrastructure component of this, which feels like it's got a payback. It has, it's the kind of thing for which debt would be issued or for which funds would be forwarded with the expectation of returns. So that's the piece that I think is kind of rattling around in this conversation that we're having right now.
Well, Dean, I'm sorry, Dean. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying it's either going to come out of free cash or we're going to use a portion of levy capacity that is not currently being used by the proposed budget and the other articles.
And if we were to use free cash, how much would that impact free cash? 200 grand, 150,000, right? Not by much, correct?
Right. It's very minimal. Free cash available at this point in time, before we account for any of the warrant articles is almost $12 million.
Yeah, and it would also have a minimal effect on the tax rate.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. This has been very helpful. Great idea.
That was a good question to end on. That was a good question from you. Thank you. Any other?
I can't see any more hands, but I
have one more question.
D.
This is D. Can you put the screen down? Good.
Sorry, it just
Right.
takes a second.
Brian, just one more question, which is, has there been a deadline set for round 2 funding?
Not as of yet. I expect it imminently.
But it has not, you expect it to be announced, but the deadline is generally going to be whatever time frame, right?
COVID has disrupted the cycle.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, we're really actually looking at FY22 starting next month.
Oh, so
And
I've got to. So you're going to the concept of delaying the infrastructure until the buses arrive.
I'm going to the concept of delaying the article until April of 2021.
Oh, no, please don't do that.
Well, if round 2 funding hasn't even been announced yet, it generally will be about a year for the funding.
No. We would have to have our ducks in a row to apply. So we need to be able to say that we are ready. We have matching funds in place, ready to go. We can't. That if this article doesn't pass, we can only do one bus, and it has to be the AC without vehicle to grid. If this does pass now, we can do 2 buses with vehicle to grid. That's where we are. If there's any delay, it would throw the project into a tailspin. I'm not going to pull this. I would love to be able to not have this discussion during the COVID problem, because I empathize with all of the budget problems that are going on. But this is a very important cog in a bigger machine. If it doesn't pass, it changes the trajectory of the fleet.
One last question, Brian. Once the infrastructure, if theoretically the pipe is in the ground, the infrastructure is in the ground, you can deliberate on what type of bus. It doesn't really matter, because you're just, the plug-in doesn't matter. You can make that choice later, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And we, in the pilot that we did with the electric vehicle, the electric school bus, we underestimated the time to install infrastructure for charging, not once, but twice. It led to about 9 months of vehicles sitting idle that couldn't be fueled. It would frustrate me to no end if we didn't learn from our 2 previous mistakes and continued to make that mistake.
We have a hand up. Phil's hand is up.
So I just wanted to say, to move this along, first of all, this is a great idea. And when the time comes when we're deliberating, I will move that we support this affirmative action on this article for $200,000 to be allocated from free cash.
I second.
And to do that, it's not time to do it yet, but I plan to do that. So maybe that'll help us move this along.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the Finance Committee? I don't see any. We do have a few folks standing by, so I'm going to open the floor to the public. Janet Miller, if you'd like to, we'll join you into the group, and you can introduce yourself and make your comment.
Okay, now I've started my video and I'm got the audio going.
Yep, you're all set.
Brian, that was a great presentation. My question relates to Article 51, which
to identify yourself.
2017.
Janet, you need to introduce yourself and
Oh,
your
I'm so
address.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Janet Cullen, 1647 Main Street. I'm a member of the Comprehensive Sustainability and Energy Committee, but I'm speaking for myself. So, Article 51.
31.
That, in 2017 set the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from base level of 2008 to 2020 of 20% and 80% by 2050. And I think electrification is a major way of making that possible. So if this does not pass, is there any other way of meeting these goals?
Is that for me?
That's for you, Brian.
So the larger goal of an 80% reduction will take many extraordinary efforts to accomplish over the next few years. This is a very important one as it's 8% of the municipal emissions. So that fleet is getting this infrastructure in place to allow that fleet to electrify will make a sizable difference in meeting that goal. Will it destroy our ability to get to 80%? No, but we would have to do more difficult choices to get that 1% back that we would get from transitioning the fleet. This would be an easier choice. This is the low-hanging fruit in getting to that goal right now. We're not at the difficult stuff yet. That will take another 10 years and we'll get some real tough choices.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, we have another attendee. Pamela Dritt, you're waiting in the queue, so we're going to bring you in. And Janet, I think we'll back you out of the group. And there we go. Can you introduce yourself and where you're from?
Hi, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. I'm very enthusiastic about this. It's one of those things that we actually save money by doing the right thing. We have to make the investment in clean infrastructure the same way we did in dirty fossil fuel infrastructure over the last century. And we can afford to do this. It isn't going to cost us any more money. We can't wait. We just can't wait. It'll be a rolling systemic improvement with all kinds of positive unintended consequences, such as, now my question is gone, but such as the buses themselves being able to act like rolling storage batteries, which would allow us to put more residential solar arrays in, which we can't do now because the grid gets maxed out on peak days, which will allow us to have more residential storage, make it even less peak, because every solar installation tends to add electricity that we don't have to buy on the times when it's most expensive, on the hot days.
Okay, thank you. We have a few more people here with their hands up. Terry Ackerman is currently in the queue, and if you could bring Terry in to make her comment, that would be good.
Okay, I'll put this on.
Hi. Thank you.
You introduce yourself, Terry.
Oh, I'm Terry Ackerman. I'm a member of the select board, but I'm speaking as an individual. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So I think this sounds like a really great idea. Very good presentation from Brian. And Dean, I thought you made a really good point that, we don't know what the source of funding is, but we know there's a pretty hefty surplus at CMLP. They don't really have a good mechanism financially to use that money for this article. So what I'm wondering is, if this article passes, whether there's a mechanism that we could use legally, like a donation from CMLP to pay back the 200,000 or add it to their pilot, or whatever mechanism we can find to work.
Great idea, Terry. Just find some sort of financial, transfer that would help, underwrite the funding is what you're suggesting. I think that's an excellent.
So I know no one from the light plan is on right now, but I have been in their meetings where they've done an analysis of their funding. And they do have to have a large surplus for covering 2 to 3 months of their transmission and capacity and generation costs. So I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I also don't want to have people leave this meeting assuming that's a decision, because they would have to be involved. I think going forward, if we could get the report to the Article 31 report to show that value coming back to the light plant, they could probably offer a rebate to the schools so that I wouldn't have to come back and ask for 50,000 to avoid taking from education funding. Maybe that's an output from that report that we could find, and they would be involved in that discussion and tell us why or why not. So there's a good idea there to keep me away from being a petitioner in the future.
Yeah, I don't think, if I can, Dean and Stephen, first of all, I believe Alice Kaufman is a participant, and she is on the light plant board, or not participant, a attendee. But I think the short of it is, as I said already, their rates are regulated and structured, and they are in the middle of studying all of that, and they've had their reserves analyzed against what best practices for utilities, and I know that study is. Actually, I'll probably learn more about it tomorrow morning, but I know the study is forthcoming. But it's one of those things where maybe in future policy making, I could see the light plant board looking at pilot contributions being set aside for things like this. But in terms of like Article 30 passes, let's go to the light plant and they'll give us the money back. I don't think that's in the cards.
Okay. Well, Alice is in the queue, so we can bring Alice in. I think you have a question, Alice. So why don't we bring Alice Kaufman into the group up to the microphone to ask her question.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi there. So my question was, Brian probably knows the answer to this, and I don't. When we purchased the first and our only electric bus, it was supposed to have had a V2G hookup at the solar plant at W.R. Grace. And I'm curious to know, did that get installed? If not, what were the problems with getting it installed? And then how do we sway the economics of a decision based on that project? And was it light plant paying for the V2G hookup to that?
No. So you described it great. It was a hiccup.
Hiccup in the hookup.
Yeah. So the pilot had aspirational goals to do vehicle to grid then. And the proposals we received they stated that they would be able to do vehicle to grid at a much lower amperage than what is proposed today. When we did the pilot, we found that yes, they had the hardware for the electric vehicle and that was operating well, but their software still had many bugs. We were the first town in all of the continental US to receive one of these buses in the US. So I think our production number is like 25. It's almost a beta vehicle. So they weren't ready, is the short answer, at that time to do vehicle to grid. And so we didn't spend money on a CCS plug for that vehicle to do the higher amperage. And we kind of looked at that concept and said, you know, it's too much to ask in this pilot. That has changed. So nationally, there are multiple vehicle to grid pilots going on with school buses, with other kinds of vehicles. And that industry has really blossomed. And for example, in one of my slides, Dominion Energy, which is a utility in Virginia, has said that they are going to buy 50 of these buses, put them on the road, and they're going to buy another 1,000, and they're going to get to 100% of the school districts in their territory, which is something like 3,000 buses, are all going to be electric. They're all going to do the vehicle to grid services by 2030. So the industry has matured since the last 5 years. And I have more confidence that these buses will do vehicle to grid. The first one, we can ask about getting it retrofit after they show us that they can do it with one of their newer buses. Does that answer?
It does. I think what I'm hearing, though, that this is still a demonstration project. It's not scalable. And it sounds like maybe there are funds, unspent funds from the first V2G project that were not expended for the installation of the software or the hardware to make it work. Are those funds still available? I should know that. I'm on the light board, but I don't know that.
Oh, no, the funds came from the state. And in fact, the electric school bus, other than, consulting with the light plant, I don't think the light plant had any funding in that. So there are the money came 100% reimbursement for the vehicle, 100% reimbursement for the charging unit. But it was one direction AC, a smaller amperage. That, and then the cost of the depot was under construction. So the schools in that project, I think they upgraded the panel for the depot building and put the conduit in the ground before they laid the asphalt because they were in the middle of construction. So that's where the funds came from. That funding from the state is gone. The pilot has ended. There's no money there. We have the bus we have today. We can talk to Lion, and I think I have a quote from them to do vehicle to grid with that vehicle, but it's not something I'm pursuing at this point because I'd rather get a demonstration of a purpose-built vehicle doing the vehicle to grid and working with the utility and have that as sometime in the future, we may upgrade that vehicle to match the existing equipment.
Okay, we have two more people stacked up. We've been at this for quite a while. I don't want people to be shorted, so we just let's keep moving along here. So I see Linda Newman is now waiting, and I'm going to promote her into the group to speak. Ms. Newman, introduce yourself, please, and then ask your question.
Hi, Linda Neiman, 59 Mallard Drive. I want to thank Brian for all of his tireless work on this article. It's really appreciated. I'm a mother of 2 elementary school kids, and I really, want this article to pass as an investment in my kids' future. We talk about the expenses of this and how it benefits the entire town. It's in line with the Article 51 from 2017 to reduce the town's greenhouse gas emissions, which a big chunk comes from transportation. So we have to address this sooner or later. And financially, it makes sense to address it earlier rather than later. And also, for the health reasons and climate reasons. The other thing I wanted to bring up is we talk about the cost and the numbers of the bus and all that, but we haven't really talked except in passing about the health benefits of having clean air and the kids riding a clean bus. Because the kids are the ones that are the most at risk because they ride the bus, and as a result, they have a higher respiration rate because they're younger, they have smaller bodies, and the kids sitting on the bus end up breathing more of the pollutants from the bus. And so as a mother, I would prefer either A, they bike to school, which I would like them to do right now, or have the option of riding an electric bus, which there's only one out there right now. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I know it's really late and my kids are wanting to go to bed. They keep pounding on the door. So I'm going to turn myself off.
All right, thank you. All right, we have one more of our visitors here. Wally, are you still waiting to speak? I thought I saw your hand up.
I am still here. I just wanted to make a comment. I thank Brian for doing all this work. And, there's no doubt the benefit of electric buses to the kids. And I think, I look at this sort of as an opportunity to prove the economics. This VW money is not going to be around for very long. We've got a lot of buses. If we're going to try to transition the fleet, we need to prove the economics. There'll be plenty of opportunity for the light plant to get in the mix of this. If we are truly going to be moving toward an electric bus fleet, because schools aren't going to be able to bite off this cost in the budget for various reasons. And so the seems like the most likely place for a program to help fund those buses down the road is going to be some partnership with the light plant. And listening to Stephen earlier, I think if we try to wait too long to get some buy-in from the light plant, we may miss the VW money. So I hate to see that because this is maybe the thing we ought to do if we miss that is put the $200,000 in Lion or Bluebird stock and wait for Dominion to buy 3,000 buses. So I hope you guys can find a way to move forward on this, identify a funding source, so we can take another step on this path toward electric buses. Thanks.
Thanks, Wally. Seeing no further questions, I think I'm ready to close the hearing. There are no more articles to be discussed on the hearing. So could I have
I'm sorry, Dean, could I just say thank you very much for spending so much time and allowing the citizens to hear this article and what's behind it. I really appreciate it. I know we're running late, so I want to say thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's part of the public process, so welcome to the party. Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
So I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing so that we can move on and we will continue our finance committee as a meeting. The hearing is being contained within our finance committee meeting this evening, and we will continue to deliberate on our recommendations on these articles. So if you want to hang around and
move, we close the hearing.
Yep. Second. There it is. Brian Taylor is the second. Okay, I'm going to call the roll. Ms. Ortner?
Yes.
And myself, Dean, yes. Mr. Swain?
Sorry, yes.
Yes. Mr. Rubenstein?
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey?
Yes.
Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Mr. Guariello?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Jameson?
Yes.
Mr. Hickling?
Yes.
Ms. Zoll?
Yes.
It is unanimous. The hearing has been closed. So now we are on to the Finance Committee. We're just going to continue our meeting. And now we are going to discuss I would think we can make pretty quick work of this agenda. Our agenda tonight is to see if we can make recommendations for our Finance Committee report and for town meeting regarding the articles we heard tonight. I have two other pieces that I'd like us to cover, and maybe we should start with that, which is the presentation that Carrie had. She had a one-slide item that just shows the uses of free cash that Mary had asked us to see, so we can just see that before we get into this.
Yeah. Can I interrupt?
Sure.
I think we have more articles than just the four we looked at tonight to make recommendations on.
We have the affordable housing article. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
We have several. We have the one to adopt the municipal housing bylaw trust. So we have a.
No. I thought we.
No, well, Carrie sent something out earlier today, and I thought that was on it. Carrie.
So I did, Dean, I did just send that to you and Mary, and we took a review of all of our notes and minutes and came up with a list of several articles that we believed we were still awaiting FinCom recommendation. If you have that handy.
I do have that handy, and I have opened it. Let's see what.
There were a couple that I wasn't exactly sure if you were going to take a position, such as the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw, but I did.
I don't think we had, that was not on our hearing, and I don't think that we considered that to have a direct financial impact. In other words, it's basically a management issue, like how is the money managed? I didn't think we were going to take a position on that. We have not taken a position on the means tested property tax exemption. Okay, we have more work to do. I'm sorry about that. So that's okay. We'll take them as we see them. Okay.
Did you want that one slide up on the?
Yes, I do. I want it before we start taking action. I'd just like us to review a slide that's just showing the potential uses of free cash that we're up against this year, just so we're aware. If you can make that a little larger, that would be helpful.
I'll try.
Gary, if you go up to slideshow.
Slideshow. I'm sorry. I'm slow. Oops.
You just added a slide.
There you go.
Okay, and now.
You're.
Okay.
There we go. Well.
Oh, but let me advance.
Slide.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go, right there.
So this basically shows our free cash policy range, and it shows the potential demands on free cash. $1 million for our annual article to reduce the tax levy, the request for $500,000 for the affordable housing until we get some of the special legislation passed. This is the second year of that. This is our requested article for $2 million to establish a stabilization fund. We've already voted affirmative action on that. I believe we voted affirmative action on 8 to reduce the property tax. And the healthy school buses and the affordable housing are what we're left to vote on this evening on the free cash. This is presuming that that's the source of funding, because Stephen had said the alternative is to just raise the tax levy. So this is this is an alternative. So why don't we take up, given this array, why don't we take up Article 14 and discuss that and the impacts on. Now, this is saying that we would end up, if all of these were to pass, we would end up at a 6.93%, which is kind of in the mid-range between 5 and 10. We've for the last several years, we've been at the top or slightly over the top, and we've had some projects come in. But if we think of the 2 million, Carrie, as sort of sliding to the side and not really impacting the town's financial resources in such the same way, it's just being encumbered for a future use. I guess I'm not as concerned about the 6.93 because it's probably somewhere closer to 8.5. I'm just guessing.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with you. And I don't think we have any reason to believe that a rating agency would have any issue with a 7% free cash rate.
Okay. So can we talk, let's dive in with Article 14, the affordable housing funding article, and see if we have any motion or any discussion. I don't think we need to see this anymore. If I could see the faces of my team here. There we go. Okay. Anybody want to speak, or should we try to have a motion to see if we can get some kind of consensus here?
Christine's got
Hey, Christine.
I have my hand up.
Yeah.
I just before we talk about these two items, so my concern on free cash is really FY22. So we are not going to generate excess funds, or I think it is unlikely that we will be adding to free cash in coming out of FY21. And if we're going to have, if we're going to see, let's see, we had 2 million in revenue hits this year. If we had 4 million in revenue hits next year, and we have lower reserves, there's only two places for things to come from. We either raise taxes, we cut spending, or we use reserves. We only have 3 levers, I think, in front of us. So I just want people to be mindful of that as we head into this discussion, because I think that's important. I think the numbers at the end of FY21 are going to be low. I think they could easily be close to that minimum. So just a thought.
Yep. Good.
Well, so you're saying that you think that the numbers will be close to the minimum. It did
unless we want to cut services, right? You're going to have to hit reserve. So that's my fear, is that if this year the town was able to absorb $1.5 million of a $2 million cut. A lot of that was related to attrition, and as they told us, which is true, that benefit will get smaller next year and the year after that, and there could be other things that we're just not going to get. So I'm concerned when I look at free cash.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else like to make a comment before we or make a motion? I would like us to stay on 14. I'd like us to get through how we're going to respond to 14 before we consider the free cash request for healthy buses. So we're not Dick.
Dean, I have a quick question on 14. Has anyone given us numbers on how many units of affordable housing $500,000 provides? And I was thinking about this about Junction Village. What is the cost to the town per unit of affordable housing? Do we have any numbers?
Well, we did have some experience in the past year with a partnership with Habitat for Humanity and CHDC, and the use of the 500 that was put in the prior year. And we didn't drain it all down, and we were able to achieve 2 units. So I think the units turned out to be somewhere in the vicinity of between 150 and 200 per unit, but that involved some contribution from, the Habitat. There's a lot of, there are a lot of levers that are being, exercised in order, just not unlike the way Brian displayed, oh, we go after this, we get this grant. So there's a lot of moving pieces to achieve that, but somewhere in the vicinity of $200,000 a unit. We were given some statistics as to how many dollars per unit Concord's contribution was going to generate, and I thought it was somewhere in the vicinity of 160,000 or 143 or something. There's some number like that sort of rattling around in my head when there's 83 units in our contribution. Now that number may very well be changing because of the tax situation that we talked about last night. So
but the TIF, if we're not getting any money from the land now, the TIF, it means that the TIF doesn't really have an economic impact, right? So it's just the cash we're putting in.
I guess that's a fair comment. That's the cash we're putting in order to get the thing up and running, to get it to function. That's right. Parshar.
I'd like to make a motion on Article 14 that the Finance Committee move to favorable action on Article 14, transfer the $500,000 of free cash.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, so now some discussion on Article 14. Anybody? We seem to have made up our minds. Mary?
I'll just make a brief comment. We deferred this because we wanted to look at how the operating budgets came in, and the operating budgets, I think, came in reasonably. This particular article is the continuation of a plan to put aside $500,000 every year until we get another source of funding, which would be either a surcharge or a premium on building permits. So this is a temporary measure. The town, I think, supported it last year. I think there is a lot of town support for this. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I support this. I do share Christine's concern about free cash. I do. But I do support this article.
Anyone else like to make a comment?
If the money doesn't get spent in the fiscal year, where does the money end up?
Depending on whether or not the Affordable Housing Trust Fund bylaw is passed, that trust fund will be set up to manage the funds. It's an oversight board. The funds flow in there, and they are responsible for the basic management of how funds are dispersed, what purposes they're put to, et cetera. So that article, if passed, will establish a mechanism. Right now, they're under the discretion of the town manager to disperse for this purpose. So that's how they'll go.
Effectively, without passing that article, this money is effectively free cash without that article.
It stays in free. It will just stay in free cash. But if we pass it, it will become a it will be on account for a designated purpose. Just not unlike their stabilization fund, but it could be expended for that purpose. It will be encumbered.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I guess we're ready for a vote. I will call the roll. Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
I'm the chair, Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Mr. Swain.
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein.
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey.
Yes.
Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
Mr. Loriano.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds.
No.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Jameson.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Abstain.
Okay, we have, I don't know the count because I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 yeses, 1 abstention, and 1 no. And it passes, and I so declare. So the Finance Committee will be recommending affirmative action on Article 14. Since we have one more article that's drawing down or would request free cash, and I presume, even though there was a little confusion about the wording in the previous presentation that the final motion will be requesting free cash. I think we should talk about Article 30 right now and see if we can get some, some decision on that. Anybody like to make a comment? Mr. Swaim, you got your hands up.
As I said, I move to support affirmative action on Article 30 in the amount of $200,000 to be allocated from free cash.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
Under discussion?
Yeah, discussion. Yep.
Yep. I just had wanted to raise a couple of points with the committee. As of today, round 2 funding hasn't even been announced. And once it's announced, there is at least a 6-month period of time in which to submit an application. So that's one point. Another one, I really believe that the report that is to be generated under Article 31 that's not being moved, I really think that it's important to have that plan prior to any other purchases. And I say purchases because of the $200,000. If Article 30 does not pass, they can still go and get 1 bus. It's not a problem. So until we have an infrastructure plan in place, until we know what the direction is for the town as well as the schools in terms of their enhancing electrification of their fleets, I think it's not in our best interest to spend the $200,000 towards the infrastructure that would have to be built. And I think the other thing is really, I really feel strongly that the school should have been presenting this. It is school buses. It's not town buses. It has to be a municipal organization, which would be CPS. And I feel that's their purview, and it's also their responsibility. And they're currently buying 2 buses this year. They're diesel buses, but they're buying 2 buses this year in this year's budget. So I just feel that this has been an awkward article. That's all.
Thank you. Mary.
I agree with what Dee just said, and I'd add that I look askance at requests for free cash, especially when they're used to just circumvent the normal budgeting process that we have in town. We have a budgeting process in town that actually looks at prioritizing and timing spending for capital or operating. And so there's this whole budget process we do all year. And to just circumvent it at the end and jump in line feels to me like it's not really respecting the process that we have. If there was a timing issue, I would understand. I just don't get a straight answer when I ask how much of this money could go away. And I'm not hearing, and actually Dee's convincing me that
it's 15 years over a period of time, but each round, they've just closed round 1 in December of 2019.
I think the town does have a commitment to electrifying, which is what we saw in Kate Hanley's report. And it's an excellent report. And I think there's momentum in the town. I think it should be part of a broader conversation so that we understand how are we going to prioritize this against all the other demands that the town has on capital, schools, all the public, the public safety buildings that we want. We've got a lot of, and so coming in around, to me, doesn't feel like the right thing to do.
See 2 hands up, Parshar and Greg. Parshar first, and then I'll go to you, Greg.
Dee and Mary, I hear what you're saying. I guess I kind of look at this as let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think the plans you're talking about would be in an ideal world, but we're presented with an opportunity to get a grant to offset what are admittedly almost 2 to 3x times the cost of getting an electric bus versus a diesel, according to what was presented. And in essence, we'd be foregoing $500,000 to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think the infrastructure that they're talking about putting in place, we heard, wouldn't be specific just to these types of buses. They would serve the town in the future with other types of buses also. So in my mind, why not take the money? Again, would love to have it be identified somewhere else, come from somewhere else, but it's $200,000. Take the money, get started. You've got 2 buses that otherwise we wouldn't get otherwise. And you're not foregoing $500,000, which almost seems a certainty that we're going to get.
Greg.
Yeah, so I think in the first time that Brian spoke, it seemed like, it was a little bit time sensitive to get the money this year because you never know if the grants are going to be in future years, right? So that was one time sensitive pressure. And if you notice, Brian always said that he is not directly asking it to come from free cash or anywhere. I understand that's where it's going to probably end up coming from, but he didn't find an avenue to make the request. So he's doing it on his own, right? So that's why I don't think he's circumventing anything, Mary, at this point. I think he's just trying to do, as Parshar said, is have doing something good for us, for the town. So, I think it's definitely a win. There should be a process for it in the future, as Dee has said, though, to get the buses. But I think it is a little bit urgent to get that grant money this year.
Wade.
So I agree with Parshar. I think there's an opportunity and there's a payback, and we should look at that as an individual opportunity. But the bigger problem is what Mary and Dee have pointed out is how do we bridge this issue between power and light and the taxpayers? The same issue is going to come up when we talk about the solidification of the middle school. Who's going to pay for it, right? So, there's a clear payback to the ratepayers, and the ratepayers and the taxpayers overlap. But is CPS going to, put up the extra money? I don't think so. It's just like the buses. It doesn't make sense for them to spend extra money for electric buses when diesel buses are cheaper. If the return goes to the ratepayers. So I think the town has to find a way to bridge this problem to make these kinds of opportunities work in the future. So I'm putting it out there. I don't know the process to make that happen, but we're going to see the same problem down the road.
Anyone else like to weigh in? Okay. So I think are we on a motion at the moment? I think we are. Yep.
Yes.
Yes. So we're on a motion for affirmative action. I think I'm going to call the roll. Okay. Ms. Ortner?
No.
I'm the chair, Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Mr. Swain?
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein?
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey?
Yes.
Ms. Hartman?
No.
Mr. Guariello?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
No.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Jameson?
Yes.
Ms. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Hickling?
Yes.
We have 3 noes. The rest of us are yeses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yeses and 3 noes. I'm sorry, we had one. Do we have one abstention in there?
No.
We have 9 yeses and 1 abstention. Didn't you abstain, John? Okay.
No.
So he's a yes.
Voted yes.
You voted yes.
We have 10 yeses and 3 noes. 10 yeses and 3
John
noes.
voted yes.
Did you use the post office down to vote?
Exactly. We have to go look at the cards and shuffle the papers. Okay, we'll look at the videotape, but that passes and I so declare. Okay, we're deep in our work now. We have the CPS budget article number 25. Why don't we just dive in on that one and see if we can get a motion on that.
I make a motion that we recommend affirmative action on Article 25, the CPS school budget.
Second.
And Chris has a second. I will call the roll. Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Ms. Ortner?
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Zoll?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Jameson,
Yes.
Mr. Guariello,
Yes.
Mr. Hickling,
Abstain.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Swain,
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey.
Yes.
I think that does it. We have one abstention. Otherwise, it is unanimous for those voting, not abstaining. Okay, so we're on to Article 26. Could I get a motion on Article 26, the CPS capital article for $830,000+?
Make a motion, affirmative action.
A second on that?
Second.
Mary, thank you. I will call the roll. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm Mr. Banfield. I vote yes. Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Mr. Jameson.
Yes.
Mr. Guariello.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Mr. Swain. Up again.
Yes.
You guys could just leave all your stuff open. It'll be fine. We'll all be fine. Mr. Tarpey.
Yes.
Okay, if I leave mine open and I'm really quiet, you can hear the loons in the background. Okay, we're on to number 27, the CCHS full budget with our allocation or our assessment. I need a motion. Ms. Ortner.
Move affirmative action on Article 27.
Okay, on second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Chris.
Hey, Dean, can I just ask a question? One question. This is they hit our guidelines, right? And then they added $3 million for the capital allocation. Was that?
No,
Not at
that's their debt.
CCHS.
That's debt.
That's for debt.
That's the debt.
And so that doesn't show up in the table that Mary, the Excel file you showed up?
That it's not an it's not a guideline.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that's what I just wanted to confirm, that's
Yeah,
all.
it's accounted for separately. They do have revenue, which goes against their usual operating budget, which is part of all that, but debt is a separate line item because it's authorized distinctly and it goes on its own track, but it's
That's
still,
what I thought, I just wanted to confirm.
it's still assessed.
Yep.
Quite the same percentages. So yeah, it's broken out as two numbers and then summed. Okay, so we're on for a vote. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm the chair, Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
Rubenstein.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Mr. Guariello.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Mr. Swain.
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey.
Yes.
It's unanimous and I so declare. So I have to look now. We have action on the articles that I presumed we would be working on coming into this meeting. And I do have a spreadsheet I'm going to take a look at that Carrie has sent me. So just give me 1 second here. Okay.
So Dean, we did not find evidence of a vote on the Minuteman VOTEC budget.
My. Okay.
And it could be that the last time you talked about it, the assessment wasn't final.
You know,
No.
I had a whole, I'm on vacation. I have a whole set of written notes because I went back through a bunch of, I literally went back through the videos of various meetings because I had to do the same thing, Carrie, and I thought, and so I sent some of these things off. So, okay, Minuteman VOTEC, we can certainly work on that. So Article 24, the Minuteman VOTEC, I believe we've had a vote on this in the past, but we can revote that. That's not a problem. Can I get a motion on Article 24, the Minuteman VOTEC budget? Do you have the number, Carrie? Just let us know what the number is if you have that handy.
I do. The total is $1,213,873. $347,229 of that is exempt debt.
Thank you. Can I get a motion on the 1,213,873 number for our assessment at the Minuteman Technical VOC budget?
Move affirmative action.
Thank you. A second? And I have a second. Okay, I will call the roll. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm Dean Banfield, the chair. I vote yes. Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Mr. Jameson.
Yes.
Mr. Guariello.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Mr. Swain.
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey.
Yes.
So it is a unanimous vote, and I so declare we have voted to recommend affirmative action on the VOC Tech budget. We have that done. We did the healthy school buses. I don't believe you highlighted special legislation, additional liquor licenses. I don't believe that's a financial article that we have a concern with. That has to do with having the select board have a few additional licenses that they can hand out on a sort of temporary basis, so they don't have to constantly have these motions within the select board meetings to give temporary licenses. That I don't think that this is a financial piece, so I'm not going to pay any attention to that. So I don't.
You have one more.
Yes, Mary.
You have one more. It's the special legislation for the senior means tested property tax exemption.
Oh, that one.
You want to?
I believe we have that. I believe came up in the select board meeting, so I guess I just overlooked
What
it.
number is that one, Mary?
That's 15.
15.
15.
Right. This is just a renewal of something that had a sunset clause in it when it was first passed.
Oh,
So this is simply a renewal of something.
Oh, right.
And I do believe that there is some modest language changing, so that there was some problems where if you qualified for some kind of state exemption, it would overlap with our local exemption and it would sort of make it problematic. So they've changed the language a little bit to fix that when they go through this renewal. That's my understanding of this article.
Is it on the consent agenda?
It is intended to be on the consent agenda, but I think that, yeah.
I don't know.
It's 10 o'clock.
Somebody, how your children are?
Dean, you told us to leave the mics open.
I suspect you do know where your children are, Greg.
You have to go,
I don't know
Greg?
if anybody grew up with that, but in the New York tri-state area, if you were watching TV at 10 o'clock,
That's right.
10 o'clock, do you know where your children are?
That's right. That's right. So are we gonna, do you want to?
My children are right here.
Very good.
Oh, so she keeps telling me it's 10 o'clock.
So I would suggest a motion on this. I'm sorry that we are late in the hour here.
All right.
Affirmative action.
So Mary's has made a motion, and Dee, I'm going to take that as a second. So we're on. Would anyone like to discuss this particular article? We're on for a vote then. I'll call the roll. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm Dean Banfield, the chair, and I vote yes. Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Mr. Jameson.
Yes.
Mr. Guariello.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Mr. Swain.
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey.
Yes.
It is unanimous, and I so declare. I don't believe we're going to take action on the trust bylaw. Carrie, do you feel like we ought to take action on the trust bylaw?
No, it's my mistake. As you mentioned, it didn't come up at your public hearing.
No, I don't think that the senior means tested, I might not have.
No, it didn't, but you did have the Board of Assessors into a regular meeting to
Yes, we did.
outside of the hearing.
Yes, we did.
Yep.
We did.
So that's okay. We're good. All right. So we've taken action now on all of these articles. We have a little bit of work left to do. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on it. We're in the hunt right now to finish out the Finance Committee report narratives that need to be done. Chris has provided a very nice job on the school budgets, which have just been published. And so her work is hot off the press and is being edited. I'm working on our 5-year tax projection. And there were 3 items that I sent out as an email, which our estimates are really quite far off the mark. And I'm just looking for feedback on how we can adjust those because they don't seem realistic in light of COVID. Did anybody see the email that I sent out today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty obvious that our estimates of the growth of state aid, the growth of these items are, and also the somewhat outsized band for the growth of the high school budget, which was really driven by the fact that earlier on they had shown some real stressors on their budget, and those seem to have evaporated. They're now back in a very comfortable position with Moody's, and things seem to be going well. So some of our upper limit band for the high school budget seem a little bit out of whack with.
Yeah.
Oh no, Dean just froze.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All the cat's away.
So if Dean hadn't have frozen, what I was going to say was that Moody's on August 10th published a 5-year projection of a number of things, obviously not specific to our circumstances and the high school and the town of Concord, but with quite a bit of relevance to the Commonwealth, to the state. So when Dean unfreezes, I might, no, now he's gone. He's left. So I might suggest people look at that. Carrie, I don't know if you'd have access to that. I'm registered there, but apparently when I forward it, that requires free registration. Anyway, that may be of some help with some of the variables in a 5-year projection.
Yep.
Well, and the other, I was going to circulate along those lines if it's helpful. CBO released an update to their baseline 5-year projections of GDP growth, inflation growth, treasury yields, et cetera. And that might also be helpful.
Who sent that out?
Sorry? Yeah, I'll send it out right when we're done here.
That the CBO, did you say?
Yeah.
Do you have access, Carrie, to Moody's reports, that August 10th one that I had mentioned before? Lingering weak revenue environment will lead to fiscal austerity and higher leverage, has a cheery name.
Yeah, no, I do not have an account, but I probably could get it.
Mary, I'm assuming if I send something out informationally to the entire committee, that's okay, right?
Yes, 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 as long as we don't respond back and start a dialogue about it. But seeing as how Dean is frozen and I don't see him returning, I'm wondering if it would be best if we each, responded to him individually and gave him our best ideas on some of the specific ranges that he asked about. So he asked about ranges for the high school, I think for state aid. Does somebody have that email in front? It was.
I do. It was the town. So the annual growth rate for the town, the annual growth rate for CPS, and then the number for CCRSD. I think those were the ones. I'm just trying to see.
I thought state aid was one.
Yeah,
State aid is one. That's exactly right.
Where is that? Where can I find that?
While you guys are searching for this, these ranges, I guess my first reaction to this is, we're really guessing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how productive that actually is at the end of the day. I mean, if we're just kind of providing a guess to the town for these ranges, what's the value in that?
Well, I would
Are we not required to make
their
it 5-year
educated guesses. They're educated guesses. I mean, they're estimates.
No, fair. I get that. I guess what I'm wondering is maybe we broaden the range to something that's a little more, that provides a little more leeway here, as opposed to trying to, move the range up or skew the range one way or the other.
So I see Dean, sorry, Mr. Chris, I guess. I see Dean as an attendee. Can we let him in or let him back in? Sorry to interrupt, Brian.
That would be great. I don't see him.
He's there.
Here he is.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt, Brian.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
10 o'clock.
Balloons. There's balloons.
Yeah, welcome to the woods. I don't know.
Okay.
I do see you guys are carrying on quite well without me, so that's good. I'm glad that there's some inertia here. So I just feel as though the model that we're providing it could use improvement along these three parameters, and I'm just trying to make it a little more realistic. Let's put it that way. The whole process is, of course, very marginal at best. We are mandated to do this, and so we're trying to do it in the most reasonable way possible, always sort of stepwise trying to make it more useful. But these numbers were done long ago and they're just out of whack. So I'm just trying to, if you guys could just email me back and say, this is my number that I think it is, and this is a range I think it might be in. And just send me that and I'll average them out, and that'll be that. I'll just fix it. I'll do the best I can to take everyone's opinion into account. And that's done through a straight averaging process. I just say, how many observations do I have? Add them all up, divide by the number. I think I throw out the high and the low. I'd have to go back and look at the spreadsheet, but I do try to take the total outliers out of the list. So maybe if you don't want to participate, just become an outlier. Just say I'm at the.
I'm an outlier, right?
That'll really screw it up if everybody tries to do that.
So the three categories are the high school, state aid, and excise tax. Those are the three categories.
Those are really the ones that are the most challenged in the way we estimated versus the reality that we are now in.
And is excise, Dean, does that include local receipts? That's
local receipts, fuel, jet fuel.
Okay.
And yeah, that's
tax.
It's that
meal
category.
tax,
Okay, meal tax, right.
And also I think that's got your car taxes, excise.
There are 4. Does it include the car, the auto?
I think it does.
It does.
All right.
So
are we going to have Carrie give us her estimate as well? Does Carrie's get baked in there? I'm sure she's got.
Carrie, you can give mine.
Carrie has the best estimate.
I have no thoughts. I have no thoughts left in me tonight.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Okay. How about tomorrow? Will you do mine tomorrow?
I was gonna. No, I already asked.
All right. So on my desk, under my door, by close of business tomorrow, under my door, because Mary, Chris, and I owe a lot of stuff to Carrie by Friday. So, we got to get it done. So we're all humping along here to get this done. So that's important. So there we go.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
I would like to move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I will call the roll. Let's see. It looks like we have reduced numbers. I'm not sure. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm the chair, Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
Mr. Swain.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Mr. Guariello.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Jameson.
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein.
So soon? Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Tarpey.
Yes.
It is unanimous. We are done for tonight.
Thank you, Dean. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.